Rich Dad, Poor Dad. What the rich teach their kids about money that the poor and middle class do not. By Robert T. Kiyosaki.
To parents everywhere, a child's first and most important teachers, and to all those who educate, influence, and lead by example. Acknowledgements. How does a person say thank you when there are so many people to thank? Obviously, this book is a thank you to my two fathers, who were powerful role models, and to my mom, who taught me love and kindness. The person most responsible for this book becoming a reality is my wife, Kim, my partner in marriage, business, and in life. She makes my life complete. Introduction. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Having two dads offered me the choice of contrasting points of view, one of a rich man and one of a poor man. I had two fathers, a rich one and a poor one. One was highly educated and intelligent. He had a PhD and completed 4 years of undergraduate work in less than 2 years. He then went on to Stanford University, the University of Chicago, and Northwestern University to do his advanced studies, all on full financial scholarships. The other father never finished the 8th grade. Both men were successful in their careers, working hard all their lives. Both earned substantial incomes, yet one always struggled financially. The other would become one of the richest men in Hawaii. One died, leaving tens of millions of dollars to his family, charities, and his church. The other left bills to be paid. Both men were strong,
and he knew that
charismatic,
every individual
and influential.
also had a part of their
Both
soul
men
that was
offered me
resilient
advice,
and could
but they
never
did not
be bought.
advise the same
It was
things.
only a question of
Both
which
men
one
believed
was stronger.
strongly in education, but did
Okay,
not recommend the same
$5 an hour.
course of study. Suddenly,
I
if
was silent.
I had had only one
Something
dad,
had changed.
I would have had to
The
accept
offer was
or
too
reject
big and
his
ridiculous.
advice.
Not many
Having two
grown-ups in
dads
1956
offered me the
made
choice
more than that,
of contrasting
but quickly
points of
my
view.
temptation disappeared.
One of a rich man
and calm
and
set
one
in.
of a poor man.
Slowly, I turned
Instead
to
of
my left
simply
to look at
accepting
Mike.
or rejecting
He
one or
looked
the
back at
other,
me.
I found
The
myself
part of my
thinking
soul that
more,
was weak
comparing,
and needy was
and then
silenced.
choosing for myself.
The part of me that had no
The
price
problem
took
was
over.
that the rich man was
I
not
knew Mike
rich
had
yet,
gotten to that point
and the
too.
poor man was not yet poor.
Good, said Rich Dad
Both
softly.
were just starting
Most
out on their
people have
careers,
a price,
and both
and they
were
have a
struggling
price
with money
because of
and
human
families,
emotions named fear
but they had
and
very
greed.
different points of view
First,
about
the
money.
fear of being without money
For
motivates
example,
us to work
one
hard.
dad would say,
and then
the
once
love
we
of
get
money
that
is the
paycheck,
root of all
greed
evil.
or desire
The
starts
other
us
said,
thinking about
the
all
lack of
wonderful
money
things
is the
money
root
can
of
buy.
all evil.
The pattern is
As
then
a young
set.
boy, having two strong
What pattern?
fathers,
I asked.
both influencing
The
me,
pattern
was
of get
difficult.
up, go to work,
I wanted
pay
to be a
bills,
good son
get
and
up,
listen,
go to work,
but the two
pay
fathers
bills.
did not say the same
People's
things.
lives are forever
The contrast
controlled by
in their
two
points
emotions,
of view, particularly
fear
about
and greed.
money, was so
Offer
extreme
them more money,
that I grew
and
curious
they continue the
and
cycle
intrigued.
by increasing their
I
spending.
began to start thinking
This
for
is
long
what I
periods
call
of time
the rat race.
about what each
There
was
is
saying.
another way? Mike asked.
Much
Yes,
of my
said
private
Rich Dad
time was
slowly,
spent reflecting,
but only a
asking
few
myself
people find
questions
it.
such as,
And what is
why
that
does he
way?
say that?
Mike asked.
And then asking
That's
the same
what I
question
hope you
of
boys
the other
will learn
dad's statement.
as you work and
It
study
would have
with
been
me.
much easier to
That
simply
is
say,
why I took away
yeah,
all
he's right.
forms of pay.
I agree with that. Or
Any hints?
to simply
Mike
reject
asked.
the point of view
We're
by
kind
saying,
of tired of working
the old
hard,
man doesn't know
especially
what he's
for
talking
nothing.
about.
Well,
Instead,
the first step is
having
telling the
two
truth,
dads
said
whom I
Rich
loved
Dad.
forced me to
We
think
haven't been lying,
and
I
ultimately
said.
choose a way of
I did
thinking
not say you
for
were
myself.
lying. I said to tell the truth.
As a process,
Rich Dad retorted.
choosing for myself
The
turned
truth
out to
about
be
what?
much more
I
valuable
asked.
in the long run
How are you feeling?
than simply
Rich Dad
accepting
said.
or rejecting
You don't
a
have to
single
say it
point
to
of
anyone
view.
else. Just admit it to
One
yourself.
of the reasons the rich get richer,
You mean the people
poor
in this
get
park,
poorer,
the
and
people
the
who
middle
work
class
for you,
struggles in debt,
Mrs. Martin,
is that the
they don't
subject
do
of
that?
money is
I
taught
asked.
at home,
I
not
doubt
in
it,
school.
said Rich Dad.
Most of
Instead,
us learn
they
about
feel
money
the
from our
fear of
parents.
not having
So
money.
what can poor
They don't
parents tell
confront
their
it
child
logically.
about money?
They react
They simply
emotionally
say,
instead of using
stay
their
in school
heads,
and
Rich
study
Dad
hard.
said. Then
The child
they
may
get a few
graduate
bucks
with
in their
excellent
hands,
grades,
and again,
but
the
with a poor
emotions of
person's
joy,
financial
desire,
programming
and greed
mindset.
take over.
And again they react. Sadly, instead of money is not taught in schools. So their emotions control their brain, scholastic and professional skills. That's correct, but not on financial skills. Instead of admitting the truth about how smart bankers, doctors, and accountants who earned excellent grades may struggle financially all of their lives, hoping that money will staggering national debt, but it is due in large part to highly educated politicians and government officials hoping again making financial decisions with little or no training in the subject of money. Fear keeps them in this trap. I often wonder what will soon happen when we have millions of people who need financial and medical assistance. The fear will go away. They will be dependent upon their families or the government for financial support. Wakes up with them. What will happen when Medicare and Social Security run out of money? Keeps them awake all night. How will a nation survive if teaching children about money continues to be left to parents? Go to work. Most of whom will be a paycheck or already are that fear gnawing at their souls. Because I had two influential fathers, I learned from both to tell the truth about that. I had to think about each dad's advice, and in doing so, I gained valuable insight into the power and effect of one's thoughts, letting his words sink in. For example, and I had heard one dad had a habit of saying, "I can't afford it," what he was talking about. The other dad forbade those words to be used. I often wondered why he insisted I ask off to work. How can I afford it? It did not seem like much fun. One is a statement, they never looked, and the other is a question. But something kept them going. One lets you off the hook, realizing the other we had absorbed as much as possible of what he was talking about. My soon-to-be rich dad said would explain that by automatically saying the word "trap," I can't afford it. Really, what I want to teach you stops working. Not just to be rich. By asking the question, being rich, how can I afford it? Solve the problem. Your brain is put to work. It doesn't? I asked. He did not mean that you should buy everything you want. It doesn't. He was fanatical about exercising your mind, the most powerful computer in the world. Some call it greed. He'd say, I prefer my brain gets stronger every day because I exercise. To desire something better, the stronger it gets, prettier, the more money fun I can make. More exciting. He believed people that automatically saying money because of desire was a sign of desire money for the joy they think it can buy. Although both the joy that money brings, I noticed often that one dad had a habit of putting his brain to sleep when it came to finances, more pleasure, and the other had a habit of exercising his brain. So they keep working. The long-term result was that one dad grew stronger financially, and the other grew weaker. But money can't do that. It is not much different, even from a person who goes to the gym to exercise on a regular basis, people versus someone who sits on the couch watching television. The reason many rich people physical exercise isn't increases your chances for health, but because of fear. And proper mental exercise, they believe that money can eliminate the fear of being poor. So they amassed tons of it. My two dads had opposing attitudes, and that affected the way they thought. Now they fear losing the money. One dad thought that the rich should pay more in taxes to take care of those less fortunate. I know people who have millions. The other said who are more afraid now than when they produce and reward those who don't losing it all. The fears that drove them to get rich, study hard so you can find a good company to work for. Needy part of their soul the other is actually screaming study hard so you can find a good company to buy. The cars and the high life money has bought them. The reason I'm not rich they worry about what their friends would say if they lost all their money. The other said, the reason I must be emotionally desperate because I have you kids. Although they look rich and have more money. Talking about money and business at the dinner table, happier while the other forbade the subject of money to be discussed over a meal. Rich dad. The avoidance of money when it comes to money psychotic as being attached to money. Take risks. As the other said, learn to manage risk. Went past our table. One believed stopping by the large rubbish can is our largest investment and our greatest asset. The three of us watched him with great interest. My house is a liability. We probably your house is your largest investment. Rich Dad pulled $1 out of his wallet. Both dads paid their bills on time. Yet one paid his bills first, came over the other paid his bills last. Took the bill, thanked Rich Dad one dad believed in a company and hurried off, the government taking care of you and your needs. He was not much concerned from most pay raises, retirement plans, medical benefits. I've met so many people who say vacation days, I'm not interested in money. Yet they'll work at a job for 8 hours a day. Who joined the military and earned a retirement and entitlement package for life in money after 20 years of active service. That kind of thinking is probably of more medical benefits than a PX privileges the military provided as retirees. As I sat there listening to my rich dad, he also loved the tenure system available through my own dad said, I'm not interested in job protection for life. He said those words job benefits seemed more also covered himself by always saying, job. I work because
He
I
would
love my
often
job.
say, "I've worked hard for the
So,
government,
what
and
do
I'm
we do?"
entitled
I
to these
asked.
benefits."
Not work for
The
money
other
until all
believed
traces
in
of
total
fear and greed
financial
are gone?
self-reliance.
No,
He spoke
that
out
would be a
against
waste
the
of
entitlement
time,
mentality
said Rich Dad,
and how it created
emotions
weak and
are what make us
financially
human.
needy people.
The word emotion
He was emphatic
stands
about
for
being
energy
financially
in motion.
competent.
Be truthful
One
about
dad
your
struggled
emotions
to save a
and
few
use
dollars.
your mind
The
and
other
emotions
created
in
investments.
your favor.
Not
One dad
against
taught me
yourself.
how to write an impressive resume
Whoa,
so I could
said
find
Mike.
a good job. The other
Don't worry
taught me
about
how
what I
to
just
write
said.
strong business
It will
and
make more
financial
sense
plans
in years
so
to
I
come.
could create jobs.
Just
be an observer.
Being a
not
proud
a reactor
two strong dads
to your
allowed me
emotions.
the luxury of
Most
observing
people
the effects
do not know
different
that it's their
thoughts
emotions
have
that
on
are
one's
doing
life.
the thinking. I
Your
noticed
emotions
that people
are
really
your
do
emotions,
shape their
but you've
lives
got to
through
learn
their
to
thoughts.
do your own thinking.
For example, my
Can
poor
you give
dad
me an
always
example?
said,
I
"I'll
asked.
never be rich."
Sure,
And that
replied Rich
prophecy
Dad,
became
when
reality.
a person says, "I need to
My
find a
rich
job,"
dad, on the other hand,
it's most
always
likely
referred
an
to
emotion
himself
doing the
as
thinking.
rich.
He
Fear
would
of
say
not
things
having
like,
money
"I'm a rich
generates
man,"
that thought.
and rich people don't do this.
But people do need
Even
money if
when
they
he
have
was
bills
flat
to
broke
pay
after
after
a major financial
they do.
setback,
Smiled
he
Rich Dad.
continued to refer
All
to
I'm
himself
saying
as a rich
is
man.
that it's fear that is all
He would
too
cover
often
himself
doing
by
the
saying,
thinking. There is a difference
"I don't
between being
understand,"
poor
said
and
Mike.
being broke. For
Broke
example,
is
said Rich
temporary.
Dad,
Poor
if the
is
fear of
eternal.
not having enough money arises,
My poor dad would say,
instead of
"I'm not
immediately running
interested
out
in
to get a
money,"
job,
or
they
"Money doesn't
instead
matter."
might ask themselves
My rich
this
dad
question:
always said, "Money
will a
is
job be
power."
the best solution to this
The power
fear
of
over
our
the long
thoughts
run?
may never be
In my
measured
opinion,
or appreciated.
the answer is no.
But it became
A job
obvious to me
is
as a
really
young
a
boy
short-term
that it was
solution
important
to
to
a
be
long-term
aware of my
problem.
thoughts and how
But
I
my dad
expressed
is always
myself.
saying, "Stay in school
I noticed that
and
my
get
poor
good
dad was
grades
poor,
so you can find a
not
safe,
because of the
secure
amount
job."
of money he
I
earned,
interjected,
which was somewhat
significant,
confused, but because of
"Yes,
his
I
thoughts
understand
and
he says
actions.
that," said Rich Dad, smiling.
As a young boy
Most
having two
people
fathers,
recommend
I
that,
became
and
acutely
it's a good
aware
path
of being
for most
careful
people.
about which thoughts I
But
chose
people
to
make
adopt
that
as my own.
recommendation primarily out
Should
of
I listen
fear.
to my rich dad, or
You mean my
to
dad
my
says
poor
that
dad?
because he's afraid?
Although both men
Yes,
had
said
tremendous
Rich
respect
Dad.
for education
He's
and
terrified
learning,
that
they
you
disagreed
won't earn
about
enough
what they
money
thought
and
was
won't
important
fit
to
into
learn.
society.
One wanted
Don't
me
get
to
me
study
wrong.
hard,
He loves
earn
you
a degree,
and wants the best
and
for
get a
you.
good job to earn
I
money.
too believe in
He
education
wanted me
and
to
a
study
job
to
are
become a
important,
professional,
but it won't
an attorney
handle the
or an
fear.
accountant, and
You
to
see,
go to
that
business
same
school for
fear
my
that makes
MBA.
him get up in the morning
The
to
other
earn a few bucks
encouraged me
is the
to
fear
study
that
to
is
be rich,
causing him
to understand
so
how money
fanatical
works,
about your
and to
going
learn
to school.
how to have it work
So
for me.
what do you recommend? I asked.
I don't work for money.
I
were
want to
words
teach
he
you
would
to
repeat
master the
over and
power
over.
of money instead of
works
being
for me.
afraid of it. They
At
don't
the age
teach
of
that
9,
in school,
I decided
and
to
if
listen
you
to
don't
and
learn
learn
it,
from
you
my rich
become a
dad about
slave
money.
to money.
In doing so,
It was
I
finally
chose
making
not
sense.
to listen to my poor
He
dad,
wanted us to
even
widen
though
our
he was
views
the one
and to see
with all
what
the
the
college
Mrs. Martins
degrees.
of this world couldn't see. A
He
lesson
used
from Robert
examples
Frost
that sounded cruel at the time.
Robert Frost
but I've never
is my
forgotten
favorite
them.
poet. My
Although I
vision
love many of
widened
his
that
poems,
day,
my
and I began
favorite
to
is
see the trap
road not
that lay
taken.
ahead for
I
most
use
people.
its lesson almost
You see,
daily.
we're all employees
The road
ultimately.
not taken.
We just work at different
Two
levels.
roads diverged
said Rich
in a
Dad.
yellow wood.
I just
And
want you
sorry I
boys
could not
to have
travel
a chance
both,
to avoid the
and
trap
be one traveler
caused by those
long
two
I stood,
emotions,
and
fear
look down one
and desire,
as far as I could.
Use them in your
to
favor,
where it bent in
not
the
against
undergrowth.
you.
Then
That's
took
what I
the
want to
other
teach you.
as just as fair.
I'm not interested
and
in
having
just
perhaps
teaching you
the
to make
better
a pile of
claim,
money,
because it was
that
grassy
won't handle the
and
fear
wanted
or
wear.
desire.
Though
If
as
you
for
don't
that, the
first
passing
handle
there
fear and
had
desire,
warned them really
and you get
about
rich,
the same.
you'll only be
and
a
both
highly
that
paid
morning
slave.
equally lay.
So
in
how do we
leaves,
avoid
no
the
step
trap?
had
I
trodden
asked.
black. Oh,
The main
I kept
cause
the
of
first for
poverty
another
or
day.
financial struggle
Yet
is
knowing
fear
how
and
way
ignorance,
leads on to
not
way,
the economy
I doubted
or the government
if I should
or
ever
the rich.
come back.
It's
I shall be
self-inflicted
telling
fear
this
and
with a
ignorance
sigh,
that keep
somewhere
people
ages
trapped.
and ages hence.
So you boys go to
Two
school
roads
and get
diverged
your
in a
college
wood,
degrees,
and
I'll
I
teach
took
you
the one
how
less
to stay
traveled
out of
by.
the trap.
And that has made all
The pieces of the
difference.
puzzle were appearing, and
My
that
highly
has made
educated
all the
dad
difference.
had a great
Over education
years,
and a great
I have
career.
often reflected
But
upon
school never
Robert
told
Frost's
him how to
poem.
handle money or
Choosing
his fear
not
of it.
to listen to my highly
became
educated
clear that I
dad's
could
advice
learn different
and attitude about money
was
from
a
two
painful
fathers.
decision. But it was a
So
decision
you've been
that shaped
talking about the
the
fear
rest
of
of
not
my
having
life.
money. How
Once
does the
I made up
desire
my
for
mind
money
about whom
affect
to
our
listen
thinking?
to, my
Mike asked.
education about money
How
began.
did you feel when I tempted
My rich
you with
dad
a pay
taught me
raise?
over a period
Did you
of
notice
30
your desires
years
rising?
until I was 39
We
years
nodded
old.
our heads.
He stopped
By
once
not
he
giving
realized
into your
that I knew
emotions
and fully
you were
understood
able to delay your
what
reactions
he had been
and
trying
think.
to drum into my
That is
often
important.
thick skull. We will always have
Money
emotions of
is
fear
one
and
form
greed
of power.
From here on
But
in,
what is more
it's imperative
powerful
for you
is
to
financial
use those emotions
education.
to your advantage.
Money comes
and
and
for the
goes,
long term,
but if
to
you
not
have
let
the
your
emotions
education
control
about
your
how money
thinking,
works, you gain
most
power
people
over
use
it
fear
and can
and greed
build
against
wealth.
themselves.
The
That's
reason
the start of
positive
ignorance.
thinking alone does not
Most
work
people
is because
live
most
their lives
people went to
chasing
school
paychecks,
and never learned
pay
how
raises,
money works
and job security
so they
because
spend
of
their
the
lives
emotions of
working
desire
for
and
money.
fear.
Not really
Because I was
questioning
only 9
where
years
those
old when I
emotion-driven
started,
thoughts are
the
leading
lessons
them.
my rich dad taught
It's
me were
just like
simple.
the picture of a
And
donkey
when it was
dragging
all
a
said
cart
and
with
done,
its owner
there were
dangling
only
a
6
carrot
main
just in
lessons
front of its
repeated
nose.
over 30
The donkey's
years.
owner may be going
This
where he wants to,
audiobook is
but the
about
donkey
those 6
is
lessons,
chasing an
put
illusion.
as simply as
Tomorrow,
possible. There
just
will only
as
be
simply
another
as my
carrot
rich
for the
dad put
donkey.
forth those lessons to me.
You mean the moment I
The
pictured
lessons
a new
are meant
baseball
not
glove,
to be
candy
answers,
and toys,
but guideposts
that's like a
that will
carrot to a
assist
donkey?
you and your
Mike
children
asked.
to grow wealthier,
Yes,
no
and
matter
as you
what
get
happens
older,
in a
your
world of
toys get
increasing
more
change
expensive
and uncertainty.
A new car,
a boat, and a big house to impress your friends, said
Chapter
Rich
1.
Dad with a smile.
Lesson 1.
Fear
The
pushes
rich
you out the door,
don't work for
and
money.
desire calls to you.
The poor and the
That's
middle class
trap.
work for money.
The rich
So what's
have
the
money
answer?
work for
Mike
them.
asked.
Dad,
What intensifies
can you tell
fear
me how
and
to
desire
get rich? Is ignorance.
My dad put down
That
the
is why
evening
rich
paper.
people with lots of
Why
money
do you want to get
often
rich,
have
son?
more fear the richer
Because
they get.
today Jimmy's mom
Money
drove
is the
up in their new
carrot,
Cadillac,
the illusion.
and they were going to their
If
beach
the
house for
donkey
the
could
weekend.
see the whole picture,
He took
it
3
might
of his
rethink
friends,
its choice
but Mike and
to
I
chase the
weren't
carrot.
invited.
They told
Rich
us we
Dad
weren't
went on to
invited
explain
because
that
a
a
human's
poor
life
kids,
is a struggle
they
between
did?
ignorance
My dad
and
asked
illumination.
incredulously.
He
Yeah,
explained
they did,
that once
I
a person
replied in a
stops
hurt tone.
searching for information and
My dad
self-knowledge,
silently shook his head,
ignorance sets
pushed
in.
his glasses up the bridge of
That
his nose,
struggle
and
is a
went back to reading
moment-to-moment
the paper.
decision. To
I
learn to
stood
open
waiting
or
for an
close
answer.
one's mind. The year was 1956.
Look, school is
I was
very
9
important.
years old.
You go to school
By
to
some
learn a
twist of
skill
fate,
or
I
profession
attended the
to
same
become a
public
contributing
school where the
member
rich
of
people
society.
sent their kids.
Every culture
We were
needs
primarily
teachers,
a sugar
doctors,
plantation town.
mechanics,
The
artists,
managers of the
cooks,
plantation
business
and
people,
the other
police
affluent
officers,
people such as
firefighters,
doctors, business
and
owners,
soldiers.
and bankers sent their
Schools
children
train
to
them
this elementary
so society
school.
can thrive
After
and
grade
flourish,
6,
said Rich
their
Dad.
children were generally sent off to private
for
schools.
many people, school is
Because
the
my
end,
family
not
lived on
the
one
beginning.
side of the street, I went to this school.
There was a long silence.
Had I lived on the other
Rich
side
Dad
of the
was
street,
smiling.
I would have
I
gone to a
didn't
different
comprehend
school
everything he
with
said
kids
that
from
day.
families
But
more like
as with
mine.
most great teachers,
After grade
his
6,
words continued
these kids
to
and I
teach
would
for
go on
years.
to the public intermediate and high
I've
school.
been a little cruel
There was
today,
no
said
private
Rich
school
Dad,
for them,
but I want
or
you to
for me.
always remember this talk.
My dad finally
want you
put
to
down the
always
paper.
think of Mrs.
I could
Martin,
tell he was
and
thinking.
I want you always
Well,
to
son,
remember that
he
donkey.
began slowly.
Never forget
if you want
that
to be
fear
rich,
and desire
you have
can
to
lead
learn
you
to
into
make
life's
money.
biggest trap.
How
if
do I make
you're not
money?
aware of
I
them
asked.
controlling your thinking.
Well, use your head,
to spend
son,
your
he
life
said,
living
smiling.
in fear, never
Even
exploring
then,
your
I knew
dreams
that really
is
meant
cruel.
That's all I'm
To
going
work
to tell
hard
you.
for money,
Or thinking
I
that
don't
it
know
will
the
buy you
answer, so
things
don't
that will make
embarrass
you
me.
happy is also cruel. A partnership
To wake
is
up in the
formed.
middle of the night,
The
terrified
next
about
morning,
paying
I told
bills,
my best friend,
is a horrible
Mike,
way
what
to
my
live.
dad had said.
To live a
As
life
best as I
dictated
could
by
tell,
the size of
Mike
a paycheck
and I were the
is
only
not
poor kids
really
in this
living
school.
life.
Mike was
Thinking
also
that a
in this
job
school
makes
by
you
a twist of
secure
fate.
is lying to yourself.
Someone had drawn a jog
That's
in the
cruel,
line for the school
and that's
district,
the trap I
and we
want you
wound
to
up in
avoid.
school with the rich
I've
kids.
seen how money runs
we weren't
people's
really poor,
lives,
but we
Don't
felt as
let
if
that
we were
happen
because
to
all
you.
the other boys
Please,
had new baseball
don't
gloves,
let money
new
run your
bicycles,
life.
new everything.
A softball rolled under
Mom
our
and
table.
Dad provided us
Rich
with the
Dad
basics,
picked it up
like food and shelter
threw
and
it back.
clothes. But that
So
was about
what
it.
does ignorance have to
My
do
dad
with
used to
greed
say,
and fear? I
if
asked.
you want something, work
Because
for it.
it is ignorance
We
about
wanted
money
things,
that causes
but there
so
was not much
greed
work
and fear,
available for
said
9-year-old
Rich Dad.
boys.
Let me give you some
So
examples.
what do we do to make
a
money?
doctor
Mike
wanting
asked.
more money to better
I don't
provide
know,
for
I
his
said,
family,
but do you want
raises
to be
his
my
fees.
partner?
By raising
He
his
agreed.
fees, it
And
makes
so
healthcare
on that
more
Saturday
expensive
morning,
for everyone.
Mike became my first
It
business
hurts the
partner.
poor people the most.
We spent
so
all
they
every morning
worse
coming up
health
with
than
ideas
those
on
with
how
money.
to make money.
Because the
Occasionally,
doctors raise their
we
fees,
talked about all the cool
attorneys
guys at
raise
Jimmy's
their
Beach House
fees.
having fun.
Because the
It hurt
attorney's
a little,
fees have gone
but
up,
that hurt was
school
good,
teachers want a
because
raise,
it inspired
which
us to
raises
keep
our
thinking
taxes,
of a way to
and
make
on
money.
and on and on.
Finally,
Soon,
that afternoon,
there will be such
a bolt of
horrifying
lightning
gap
struck.
between the rich
It
and
was
the
an
poor
idea Mike
that
got from a
chaos will
science
break
book
out
he had read.
And another great civilization
we shook
will
hands,
collapse,
and the partnership
History
now had a
proves
business.
the great
For the
civilization's
next
collapse,
several weeks,
when the gap
Mike and I
between
ran
the
around
haves
our
and
neighborhood,
have-nots
knocking
is too
on
great.
doors and asking our
Sadly,
neighbors if they would
America
save their
is on that
toothpaste
same
tubes
course
for us.
because we haven't
With
learned
puzzled
from
looks,
history.
most adults
We only
consented with a
memorize
smile.
historical dates
Some
and names,
asked us what we
not
were
the
doing,
lesson.
to which we replied,
Aren't prices
"We can't tell
supposed to
you.
go up?
It's a
I
business
asked.
secret."
In an educated
My mom
society
grew
with a
distressed
well-run
as the
government,
weeks wore on.
prices should
We had
actually
selected
come
a
down.
site next to her
Of
washing
course,
machine
that is
as
often
the
only
place we
true
would
in theory.
stockpile our raw materials.
Prices go up because of
In a
greed
brown
and
cardboard
fear
box
caused by
that at
ignorance.
one time held
If
ketchup
schools
bottles,
taught people
our
about
little
money,
pile of
there
used
would be more
toothpaste
money
tubes
and lower
began
prices.
to grow.
But schools
Finally,
focus
my
only
mom
on
put her
teaching
foot down.
people to work for money.
The sight of her neighbor's
not how
messy,
to harness
crumpled
money's
used
power.
toothpaste tubes had
But
gotten
don't we
to
have
her.
business schools?
"What
Mike
are
asked,
you boys doing?"
And haven't
she
you
asked.
encouraged me to
And I
go
don't
for my
want to hear
MBA?
again that it's a
Yes,
business
said
secret.
Rich Dad.
Do
But
something
all
with
too
this
often,
mess,
business
or I'm
schools
going to throw
train
it out.
employees to become sophisticated
Mike and
bean
I
counters.
pleaded and begged,
Heaven forbid a
explaining that
bean
we would
counter
soon
takes
have
over
enough,
a business.
and then we would
All
begin
they do
production.
is look at the numbers,
We informed her
fire people,
that we were
and
waiting
kill
on
the
a couple of
business.
neighbors to finish
I
their
know this
toothpaste
because
so
I
we
hire
could have
bean
their
counters.
tubes.
All
Mom
they think
granted
about
us
is cutting
a 1
costs
week
and raising
extension.
prices, which
The
caused more
date to begin
problems.
production was moved
Bean
up,
counting
and the pressure
is
was on.
important. I wish
My
more
first
people knew
partnership
it, but
was
it,
already
too,
being
is
threatened
not the
with an
whole
eviction
picture.
notice by my
Added
own
Rich
mom.
Dad angrily.
It became Mike's job
is there
to
an
tell
answer?
the neighbors to
Asked Mike.
quickly use up their toothpaste,
Yes, said
saying
Rich
their
Dad.
dentist wanted
Learn
them
to
to brush
use
more
your
often
emotions
anyway.
to think.
I
Not
began to
think
put
with
together
your emotions.
the production line.
When you boys mastered
One
your
day,
emotions by
my dad
agreeing to
drove
work
up with
for
a friend
free,
to see
I
two
knew there was
9-year-old
hope.
boys in the driveway
When you
with a
again
production
resisted
line
your
operating
emotions
at
when I
full
tempted
speed.
you with more money,
There was
you were
fine
again
white
learning
powder
to think
everywhere.
in spite of
On
being
a long
emotionally
table
charged.
were small milk cartons
That's
from
the
school,
first step.
and our family's
Why
hibachi
is that
grill
step
was
so
glowing
important?
with red
I
hot
asked.
coals at maximum heat.
That's up to you
Dad
to find
walked
out.
up cautiously,
If you
having
want
to
to
park
learn,
the car
I'll
at the
take
base
you
of the
boys
driveway
into the briar
since the
patch,
production
a
line
place
blocked the
almost
carport.
everyone else avoids.
As he and his
If
friend
you
got
go with
closer,
me,
they
you'll
saw a
let go of
steel
the
pot
idea
sitting
of
on
working
top
for
of the
money,
coals,
and
in which
instead
the toothpaste
learn to
tubes
have money
were being
work for
melted
you.
down. In those
And what
days,
will we get if we
toothpaste
go with
did
you?
not come in plastic
What if we agree
tubes.
to learn from you?
The tubes were made
What
of
will we
lead,
get?
so
I
once the
asked.
paint was burned off,
The same
the
thing
tubes
Brer
were
Rabbit
dropped in a
got,
small
said
steel
Rich
pot.
Dad, referring to the
They
classic
melted
children's
until
story.
they became liquid.
Is there a
And with
briar
my
patch?
mom's pot
I asked.
holders, we poured
Yes,
the lead through a
said Rich
small
Dad.
hole
The
in the
briar
top
patch
of the milk
is our
cartons.
fear and greed.
The milk cartons were
Confronting
filled
fear,
with plaster of
weaknesses,
Paris,
and
white powder
neediness
was
by
everywhere.
choosing our own thoughts
In my
is
haste,
the way out.
I had knocked the bag over,
Choosing
and
our
the entire
thoughts?
area
Mike
looked
asked,
like it had been
puzzled.
hit by a snowstorm.
Yes,
The
choosing
milk
what we
cartons
think
were the
rather
outer
than
containers
reacting to
for
our
plaster
emotions.
of Paris molds.
Instead of just
My
getting
dad
up
and his
going
friend
to work
watched
because
as we
not having the
carefully
money to
poured
pay
the
your
molten
bills
lead
is
through a
scaring
small
you.
hole
Ask
in the
yourself,
top of the
is
plaster
working
of Paris
harder
cube.
at this the best
Careful,
solution to this
my dad
problem?
said. I
Most
nodded
people
without
are
looking
too
up.
afraid to rationally
Finally,
think things
once
through
the pouring
and
was
instead
through,
run out
I
the
put
door
the
to a
steel
job
pot
they
down
hate.
and smiled
The
at my
tar
dad.
baby is in control.
What are you boys doing?
That's what I
He
mean by
asked with a
choosing your
cautious
thoughts.
smile.
And
We're
how do
doing
we
what
do
you
that?
told me to
Mike
do.
asked.
We're going to be rich.
That's what I will
said.
teach you.
Yup,
I'll teach you
said
to
Mike,
have a choice
grinning
of thoughts
and nodding his
rather
head.
than a
We're
knee-jerk
partners.
reaction, like gulping
what
down
is
your
in those
morning
plaster
coffee
molds?
and
My
running
dad
out
asked.
the door.
Watch,
Remember
I
what I
said.
said before.
This should be a good batch.
A job is only
With
a
a small
short-term
hammer,
solution
I
to a
tapped at the
long-term
seal that
problem.
divided the cube in half.
Most people have only one
Cautiously,
problem in mind.
I pulled up the
and it's
top half of
short-term.
the plaster mold,
It's the
and a
bills
lead
at the end of the
nickel
month.
fell out.
The tar baby.
Oh my
Money
God,
controls their
my dad
lives,
said.
or
You're
should I say the
casting
fear and
nickels out of
ignorance
lead.
about money controls it.
That's right, Mike
So
said.
they do
We're doing
as
as
their
you told
parents
us to
did.
do.
They
We're
get up every
making
day
money.
and go work for money.
My dad's
not
friend
taking the
turned
time
and
to
burst
ask
into
the question,
laughter.
Is
My
there
dad
another
smiled
way?
and shook his head.
Their emotions
Along
now
with a
control
fire
their
and a
thinking,
box of
not
spent
their
toothpaste
heads.
tubes In front of him,
Can you tell
were
the
two
difference
little
between
boys
emotional
covered with
thinking
white dust,
and the head
smiling
thinking?
from ear to
Mike
ear.
asked. Oh yes,
He asked
I
us
hear
to
it
put
all the
everything
time,
down, said
and
Rich
sit
Dad.
with him on the front
I
step
hear
of our
things
house.
like, well, with a
Everyone
smile,
has to work.
he gently
Or
explained what the word
rich are crooks.
counterfeiting
Or
meant.
I'll get another
Our
job.
dreams
I deserve
were
this
dashed.
raise. You can't
You
push
mean
me
this is
around.
illegal?
Or
Asked Mike
I
in a
like this
quivering
job
voice.
because it's secure. Let
No
them go,
one
my
asks,
dad's friend said.
Is there something
they might
I'm
be
missing
developing
here?
a natural talent, which would break through
My
the
dad
emotional
glared at
thought
him.
and give you time
Yes,
to think clearly.
it is illegal, my dad said gently.
As we headed back
But
to
you
the
boys
store,
have shown
Rich
great
Dad
creativity
explained that
and
the
original
rich
thought.
really did
Keep
make
going.
money.
I'm really
They
proud
did not
of you.
work for it.
He went on to explain that when Mike and I were casting 5-cent pieces out of lead before we began cleaning up our mess, we were very close. The business was over the way the rich think. The problem sweeping the powder was that creating money is legal for the government and banks to do. I guess Jimmy and his friends are right for us to do. We are poor. There are legal ways to create money from nothing, as I said that. He told us. Boys, he said, Rich Dad went on to explain that the rich know that money is an illusion. The most important thing truly like that you carrot for the donkey. Most people only out of fear and dream of getting rich. The illusion of money is held together by billions of people proud of the two of you. Believe I will say it again. Keep going. Money is really made up. It is only because of the illusion of confidence and the ignorance of the masses still did not know what to do. Stands. So how come you're not about the gold standard that America was on? Because I chose to be a school teacher. Was actually school teachers really don't think about being rich. What concerned him just like the rumor that we would someday go off the gold standard, but I really don't know how to make money backed by something tangible. Mike and I turned and continued our cleanup. All hell will break loose, said my dad. The poor, if you boys want to learn how to be rich, will have their lives ruined. Talk to your dad, because they will continue to believe that money is real with a scrunched up face. And that the company they work for, or the government, repeated my dad with a smile. Your dad and I have the same banker, and he raves about your father. It made He's told me several times that your father is brilliant when it comes to making money. Seeing what others miss. My dad, as he climbed into his pickup truck outside his convenience store, then how come we don't have a nice car and a nice house like the rich kids at school? But the sooner you forget about a nice car and a nice house, the easier your adult life will be. Or you know how to make money. Brain, my dad replied. Work for free. Jimmy's dad works for the sugar plantation. Will show you ways of making money far beyond what I could ever pay you. And I work for the government. You will see things that other people never buys the car for him. Most people, the sugar never see these opportunities, is in financial trouble because they're looking for money and security. Have nothing, so that's all they get. Your dad is different, Mike. The moment you see one opportunity, building an empire, you'll see them, and I suspect for the rest in a few years, he will be a very rich man. I'll teach you something else. With that, Mike and I got excited again. You'll avoid one of life's biggest traps. We began cleaning up the mess caused by our now defunct first business, and waved goodbye to Mrs. Martin. As we were cleaning, we went back to the park for how and when to talk to Mike's dad. Spent several more hours thinking was that Mike's dad worked long hours. We spent the next week at school thinking and talking too. His father owned warehouses, a construction company, a chain of stores, and 3 restaurants. At the end of the second Saturday, I was again saying goodbye to Mrs. Martin and looking at the comic book stand with a longing gaze. He was going to talk to his dad when he got home that night Saturday and ask him that I didn't have any money to buy comic books. Mike promised to call as Mrs. Martin said goodbye to Mike and me. I saw her do something I'd never seen her do before. At 8:30 p.m. Mrs. Martin was cutting the front page of the comic book in half. I put the phone down. She kept Mike's top half of the comic book cover with us and threw the rest of the book on into Saturday, a large cardboard box. 7:30 a.m. bus to the poor side of town. When I asked her what she did with the comic books, she said, "The lessons begin." I throw them away. I give the Mike and I met with his dad that morning at 8 o'clock. Distributor for credit. He was already when busy, he brings in having been at work for more than an hour. In an hour, his construction supervisor Mike and I waited just for an hour in his pickup truck. Soon, as the distributor arrived, simple, and I asked him if we could have the comic books. Mike met me at the door. To my delight, he said, "Dad's on the phone. You can have them," and he said to wait on the back porch and do not resell them. As he opened the door. Remember our old business partnership? As I stepped across the threshold of the Agent house, using a spare room in Mike's basement just inside the door, we began piling hundreds of comic books to hide the years of wear from countless comic book library was open to the public. Although we hired Mike's younger sister, who loved to study, to be head librarian. I felt claustrophobic as I entered the narrow living room that was filled with old, to the library, overstuffed which was open from 2:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. every day after school. Sitting on the couch were 2 women, customers, both a little older than my mom, could read as many comics as they wanted. Sat a man in workman's clothes. It was a bargain for them since a comic cost 10 cents each, and they could read 5 or 6 in 2 hours. And polished work boots. Mike's sister, he was about 10 years older than my dad, to make sure they weren't borrowing any comic books. As Mike and I walked past them toward the back porch, logging in how many kids showed up each day, who they were, and any comments they might have. They work for my dad. Mike and I average $9.50 per week. The women are the managers of the restaurants. And as you arrived, you saw the construction supervisor and allowed her to read the comments on a road project about 50 miles from here, since she was always studying. His other supervisor, who was building a track of houses, our agreement left before you got here every Saturday. Does this go on all the time? All the comic books from the different stores. Not always. We kept quite our agreement to the distributor by not selling any comic books. Down next to me, we burned them. Once I asked my dad if he would teach us to make money. We tried opening a branch office, but we could never quite find someone as trustworthy and dedicated cautious as Mike's sister. At an early age, he had a funny look on his face. We found out how hard it was, and then he said he would make us an offer. 3 months after the library first opened, a fight broke out in the room. I sat there, perched on bullies from another neighborhood pushed their way in, and Mike's dad suggested we shut down the business. Do you know what the offer is? Our comic book business shut down, and we stopped working on Saturdays at the convenience store. Suddenly, Mike's dad burst through the rickety screen door because he had new things he wanted to teach us. Mike and I jumped to our feet. He was happy, not out of respect, because we had learned our first lessons so well. We learned to make money work for us. He pulled up a chair to sit down with us. By not getting paid for our work at the store, we were pulled our chairs away from the wall to sit in front of him. An opportunity. He was a big man, about 6 feet tall, starting our own business, the comic book library. My dad was taller, we were in control of our own finances, and 5 years older than Mike's dad. On an employer. They sort of looked alike. The best part, though, not of the same ethnic makeup, generated money for us. Maybe their energy was similar. Even when we weren't physically there. Mike says you want to learn to make money for us. Is that correct, Robert? Instead of paying us money, I nodded my head quickly, had given us a little trepidation. So much more. He had a lot of power behind his words and smile. Chapter 2. Okay, here's my offer. I'll teach you financial literacy, but I won't do it classroom style. It's not how much money you make. I'll teach you. It's how much money you don't work for me. I won't teach you. In 1990, I can teach you faster. Mike took over his father's empire, and I'm wasting my time. In fact, if you just want to sit and job than his dad did. School. We see each other once or twice a year on the golf course. He and his wife are wealthier than you can imagine. Rich Dad's empire is in great hands. I've got too much work to do to waste my time. His son to take his place. If you can't make up your mind decisively, then you'll never learn to make money anyway. In 1994, I retired at the age of 47, to make quick decisions is an important skill. Retirement does not mean that you asked for. For us, is beginning, it means that, or it's over, barring unforeseen cataclysmic changes, said with a teasing smile, or not work, take it, and our wealth grows automatically, staying ahead of inflation, said Mike's dad. Our assets are large enough to grow by themselves. After I'm through with planting a tree, you'll ride with her to my superette for years, and you can begin working. Then one day, I'll pay you 10 cents an hour, and you'll work 3 hours every Saturday. Then but I have a softball game today, for your enjoyment. Mike's dad lowered his voice to run the empire, and I chose to retire or leave it. Whenever I speak to groups of people, I reply, they often ask what I would recommend that they do instead of playing. How do I get started? Is there a book you would recommend? 30 cents later. What should I do by 9 a.m. that day? Mike and I were working for Mrs. Martin. She was a kind and patient woman. She always said that Mike and I reminded her of her 2 grown sons. Of the following story. Although kind, she believed in hard work and kept us moving. We spent 3 hours taking canned goods off the shelves of our greatest leaders and richest businessmen held a meeting at the Edgewater Beach Hotel in Chicago. It was excruciatingly Charles Schwab, head of the largest independent steel company, whom I called my rich Samuel dad, Insull, 9 president of the world's largest utility, with a large parking Howard lot. Hobson, head of the largest version of the 7-Eleven convenience stores. Kruger, little president of International Match Company, bought items one of the world's largest companies, butter, at that and time. Cigarettes. Leon Fraser, president of the Bank of International Air Conditioning, was widely used. Richard Whitney, and the stores president of the New York Stock Exchange because of the heat. Arthur Cotton on 2 sides of the store. The doors had to be wide open to the road and parking lot. And Albert Fall, every time a car drove President Harding's pulled into the parking lot, 25 years later, unsettle in 9 of these titans ended their lives as follows. As long as there was no air conditioning. After living for 5 years on borrowed money. Mike and I reported to Mrs. Martin in a foreign land. Our 3 hours. And Kruger and Cotton by noon also died broke. Our work was over. Hobson and she dropped 3 little dimes in each of our hands. Albert Fall were now, released even from prison, at the age of 9 and Fraser and Livermore, 30 cents was not too exciting. Comic books cost 10 cents back then, what really happened so I usually spent my money on comic books and went 1923, home. It was by just Wednesday before the 1929 market I was ready to quit and the Great Depression. I had agreed to work only because I wanted to learn to make money from Mike's dad. And
The
now
point
I was
is
a
this.
slave for 10 cents
Today,
an hour.
we live in times
On top
of
of
greater
that,
and
I had
faster
not seen
change
Mike's
than
dad
these
since
men
that
did.
first Saturday.
I suspect there will
I'm
be many
quitting,
booms
I
and
told Mike
busts
at
in the
lunchtime.
coming years.
School
that will
was
parallel
boring,
the ups
and now
and
I did
downs
not even have
these
my
men
Saturdays
faced.
to look forward to.
I am concerned
But
that
it was
too
the
many
30
people
cents that
are
really
too
got to
focused
me.
on money and not
This
on their
time,
greatest
Mike
wealth,
smiled.
their education.
What are you laughing
If
at?
people
I
are
asked with
prepared to
anger
be
and
flexible,
frustration.
keep an open mind
Dad
and
said
learn,
this would happen.
they will grow
He said to
richer
meet with
and
him when
richer
you were ready to
despite
quit.
tough changes.
What? I
If
said
they think
indignantly.
money will solve
He's
problems,
been waiting for me
they
to
will
get
have
fed
a
up.
rough ride.
Sort of,
Intelligence
Mike said.
solves problems
Dad's kind of
and
different.
produces money.
He doesn't teach
Money
like your
without
dad.
financial
Your
intelligence
mom and dad
is
lecture
money
a lot.
soon gone.
My dad is quiet and
Most
a man of
people
few
fail
words.
to realize that in
You
life,
just wait till this
it's
Saturday.
not how much
I'll
money
tell him
you
you're
make,
ready.
it's how much money
You mean
keep.
I've been set up?
We've all heard
No,
stories of
not
lottery
really.
winners who are poor,
But maybe.
then suddenly
Dad
rich,
will explain
and
on
then
Saturday.
poor again. They win millions,
Waiting in
yet are
line on
soon
Saturday.
back where they started.
I was ready to
Or
face Mike's
stories of
dad.
professional athletes,
Even my real
who
dad
at the
was
age of
angry with him.
24
My
are
real
earning
dad,
millions,
the one I
but are
called the
sleeping
poor
under
one,
a bridge,
thought that
10
my
years
rich dad
later.
was violating child
I
labor
remember a
laws
story
and should be
of a young
investigated.
basketball player who
My
a year
educated
ago
poor
had
dad
millions.
told me to
Today,
demand what I
at
deserve,
just 29,
at least
he
25
claims his
cents an
friends,
hour.
attorney,
My poor
and
dad
accountant
told
took his
me
money
that if
and
I
he
did
was
not
forced
get a
to
raise,
work at a car
I was to
wash for
quit
minimum
immediately.
wage. He was fired
You
from
don't
the
need
car
that
wash
damn job
because
anyway,
he refused
said my
to
poor
take off
dad
his
with
championship
indignation.
ring as he was wiping off
At
the
8
cars.
o'clock Saturday morning,
His
I
story
walked
made
through the door
national
of Mike's
news,
house
and he
when
is
Mike's
appealing
dad
his
opened it.
termination, claiming hardship
Take a seat
and
wait in line,
discrimination.
he said as I
He
entered.
claims that
He
the
turned
ring is all
and
he has
disappeared
left,
into his little
and if
office
it was stripped
next
away,
to a bedroom.
he'll crumble.
I looked around the
I know
room
so many
and didn't
people
see
who
Mike
became
anywhere.
instant millionaires.
Feeling awkward,
And while I am glad some
cautiously
people
sat
have
down
become
next
richer
to the
and
same
richer,
two women who
I
were there
caution
4
them
weeks
that
earlier.
in the long run,
They
it's not
smiled
how much
and
money you
slid
make,
down the couch to
it's
make
how
room
much you
for me.
keep and how many generations
45
you
minutes
keep it.
went by, and I was
So
steaming.
when people ask,
The two women
where
had
do
met
I
with
get
him
started,
and left 30
or
minutes
tell
earlier.
me how to get rich
An
quick,
older gentleman was
they
in there for
often
20
are greatly
minutes and was
disappointed
also
with
gone.
my answer.
The
I
house
simply
was empty,
say to them
and
what
here
my
I
rich
sat
dad
in a
said to
musty,
me when
dark
I was a
living
little
room
kid.
on a beautiful sunny
If
Hawaiian
you want
day,
to be rich,
waiting
you
to
need
talk
to
to a
be
cheapskate
financially
who
literate.
exploited children.
That idea
I could hear
was
him
drummed
rustling
in my
around
head
the office,
every time
talking
we were
on the
together.
phone and
As
ignoring
I said,
me.
my educated
I was
dad
ready to
stressed
walk
the
out,
importance
but
of
for
reading
some
books,
reason, I
while
stayed.
my rich dad stressed the need
Finally,
to master
15
financial
minutes
literacy.
later, at exactly 9 o'clock,
If you are
Rich
going
Dad
to build
walked out
the
of his
Empire
office,
State Building,
said nothing,
the first thing
and
you need to
signaled
do
with his
is dig a
hand
deep
for
hole
me to
and
enter.
pour a strong foundation.
I understand you
If
want to
you are
raise
going to
or
build
you're
a home
going to
in the
quit,
suburbs,
Rich Dad
all
said
you need
as
to
he
do
swiveled in
is
his
pour a
office chair.
6-inch slab of concrete.
Well, you're
Most
not keeping
people,
your end of
in
the
their
bargain,
drive to
I
get
blurted
rich,
out,
are
nearly in
trying to
tears.
build an Empire State
It was
Building
really
on
frightening
a
for me to
6-inch
confront a
slab.
grown-up.
Our
You
school
said that
system,
you would teach
created
me
in
if
the
I worked for
agrarian
you.
age,
Well,
still
I've
believes
worked
in
for you.
homes with
I've
no
worked
foundation.
hard. I've given up my
Dirt
baseball
floors
games to
are
work
still
for you,
the rage.
but you haven't
So
kept your
kids
word,
graduate from
and you
school
haven't taught me
with
anything.
virtually no financial
You are a
foundation.
crook, like everyone in town
One
thinks
day,
you are.
sleepless
You're greedy.
and deep in debt in
You
suburbia,
want all the money
living
and
the
don't
American
take care
dream,
of your
they
employees.
decide
You
that
made
the
me
answer
wait
to
and
their
don't show
financial
me any
problems
respect.
is to
I'm
find a
only
way
a little boy,
to get rich
but I
quick.
deserve to be treated better.
Construction on the
Rich
skyscraper
Dad rocked
begins.
back in his swivel
It
chair,
goes up quickly,
hands up to
and
his chin,
soon,
and
instead
stared
of
at
the
me.
Empire State Building,
Not
we have
bad,
the Leaning
he
Tower
said.
of suburbia.
In less than a month, you
sleepless
sound
nights
like most of
return.
my employees.
As for
What?
Mike and me
I
in our
asked,
adult years,
not understanding
both
what
of
he
our
was saying,
choices were
I
possible
continued
because
with my
we were
grievance.
taught to pour a
I
strong
thought you were
financial
going to keep
foundation
your end of the bargain
when we
and
were
teach
just
me.
kids.
Instead, you want to torture
Accounting
me?
is
That's
possibly
cruel.
the most
That's
confusing,
really cruel.
boring subject in the world.
I am teaching you.
But if you want to be
Rich Dad
rich
said
long
quietly.
term, it could be
What have you
the
taught
most
me?
important
Nothing,
subject.
I said angrily.
For Rich
You
Dad,
haven't even
the
talked
question
to me once
was how
since
to
I
take
agreed
a
to work for
boring and
peanuts.
confusing subject
10
and
cents
teach
an
it
hour.
to kids.
Ha! I should
The
notify
answer
the
he
government
found
about you.
was to make it simple
We have child labor laws, you know. Pictures. My dad works for the government, dad, you know. Poured a strong financial foundation for Mike and me. Dad. Now you sound just like most of the people created a simple way to teach us. People I've either fired years or he only drew pictures and used few words. What do you have to say? Mike and I understood the simple drawings, pretty brave the jargon, for a little kid, the movement of money. You lied, and then in later years, I've worked for you, and you have not kept your word. You haven't taught me anything. Mike has gone on to master much more complex and sophisticated accounting analysis, Rich Dad, because he had to in order to run his empire. Never talked to me.
I've
I
worked
am
for
not as
3 weeks,
sophisticated,
and you have
because
not
my
taught me
empire is
anything,
smaller,
I said with a
yet
pout.
we come from the same simple
Does teaching
foundation.
mean talking or a
Over
lecture?
the following
Rich
pages,
Dad asked.
we will discuss those
yes,
same simple
I
line
replied.
drawings Mike's dad created
That's how
for
they
us.
teach you in school,
Though
he
basic,
said, smiling.
those drawings
But
helped
that is
guide
not how
2 little
life
boys
teaches you.
in building
And
great
I would
sums
say
of
that
wealth
life is
on
the
a
best
solid
teacher
and
of all.
deep foundation. Most of the time, life does not talk to you.
Rule number 1,
it just sort
you
of
must
pushes
know
you
the
around.
difference between an asset
Each
and a
push is
liability.
life saying,
and
wake
buy
up,
assets.
there's something I want you to learn. If you want to be rich,
What
this
is this
all
man
you
talking
need to know.
about? I asked
it is
myself
rule number
silently.
1. It
Life
is the only
pushing me
rule.
around was life
This may
talking
sound
to me?
absurdly simple.
Now I
but
knew
most
I had to
people
quit my
have
job.
no idea
I
how
was talking to
profound
someone who
this
needed
rule
to be
is.
locked up.
Most people
If
struggle
you learn
financially
life's
because
lessons,
they do not
you
know
will
the
do
difference
well.
between an asset
If not,
and a liability.
life will just continue to push
Rich
you
people
around.
acquire assets.
People do
the
2
poor
things.
and middle class
Some
acquire
just let
liabilities
life push them
that
around.
they think are assets.
Others
said
get
Rich
angry
Dad.
and push back.
When Rich
But
Dad
they push
explained
back
this to
against
Mike
their
and me,
boss,
we
or their
thought
job,
he was kidding,
or their husband
Here
or
we
wife.
were, merely
They do not
teenagers
know it's
and waiting
life
for the secret
that's
to getting
pushing.
rich. And this
I
was
had
his
no
answer.
idea what he was talking
It was
about.
so simple that we stopped
Life
for a long
pushes all
time
of us
to think
around.
about it. Some people give up
What is
and
an
others
asset?
fight.
Asked Mike.
A few learn the lesson.
Don't worry
and
right
move
now,
on.
said Rich Dad.
They
Just
welcome
let the
life
idea
pushing
sink
them
in.
around. To
If
these
you
few
can comprehend
people,
the simplicity,
it means they need
your
and
life
want to
will
have
learn
a plan
something.
and be
They
financially
learn and
easy.
move on.
It is
Most
simple.
quit.
That is
And a
why
few
the
like
idea
you
is
fight.
missed. Rich Dad
all we
stood
need
and
to
shut
know
the
is what
creaky
an
old
asset
wooden
is
window that
acquire
needed repair.
them.
And we'll be rich? I
If
asked.
you learn this lesson,
Rich
you
Dad
will
nodded
grow
his
into
head.
a wise,
It's
wealthy,
that simple.
and happy young man.
If it's that simple,
If
how
you
come
don't,
everyone is
you
not
will spend
rich?
your
I
life
asked.
blaming a job,
Rich Dad
low
smiled.
pay, or
Because
your
people
boss
do not
for
know
your
the
problems.
difference between an
You'll
asset
live
and a
life
liability.
always hoping for that big break
I remember
that will
asking,
solve all your
how
money
could adults
problems.
be so misguided? If it is
Rich
that
Dad
simple,
looked over
if
at
it
me
is
to
that
see if I
important,
was still listening.
why would everyone
His
not
eyes
want to find
met
out?
mine.
It
We
took
stared
Rich
at
Dad
each
only
other,
a few minutes to
communicating
explain
through our
what
eyes.
assets and liabilities
Finally,
were.
I looked away.
As
Once
an adult,
I had absorbed
I have
his
difficulty
message.
explaining
I
it to
knew
other
he was
adults.
right.
I
The
was blaming
simplicity
him,
of the idea
and I did
escapes
them
them
because they have
I
been
was
educated
fighting.
differently.
They
Rich
were
Dad
taught by
continued.
other educated professionals,
Or,
such
if
as
you are the kind
bankers,
of person who has
accountants,
no guts,
real estate
you
agents,
just give up
financial
every time
planners,
life
and
pushes
so
you.
forth.
If you are
The
that kind
difficulty
of person,
comes in
you'll
asking
live
adults
all your
to
life
unlearn
playing it safe,
or become
doing
children
the
again.
right things,
An
saving
intelligent
yourself
adult
for some
often
event
feels
that
it
never
is demeaning
happens.
to pay attention
Then
to
you
simplistic
die a
definitions.
boring old man. Rich
You'll
Dad
have lots
believed
of
in
friends
the KISS
who really
principle.
like you
Keep
because
it
you were such a
simple,
nice,
stupid,
hard-working
or
guy.
keep it super
But the
simple.
truth is
So
that you
he
let
kept it
life
simple
push
for
you
us,
into submission.
and that made our financial
Deep down,
foundation
you
strong.
were terrified of taking
So
risks.
what causes
you really
the
wanted
confusion?
to win, but
How
the
could
fear of
something so
losing
simple
was greater
be so
than the
screwed
excitement
up?
of winning.
Why would someone buy an
Deep
asset
inside,
that was really
you
a
and only
liability?
you will know
the
you didn't
answer
go
is
for
found
it.
in basic
You
education.
chose to play it safe.
We focus on the
Our
word
eyes
literacy
met again.
and not financial
You've been
literacy.
pushing me around?
What
I asked.
defines something to be an
Some
asset
people
or
might
a
say that,
liability
smiled
are not
Rich Dad.
words. In
I would
fact,
say
if
that
you
I just
really
gave
want
you
to
a
be
taste of
confused,
life.
look up the words
What
asset
taste
and
of life?
liability
I asked,
in the dictionary.
still angry.
I
but
know
now
the definition
curious
may sound
and
good
ready
to
to
a
learn.
trained accountant, but for
You
the
boys
average
are
person,
the first
it makes
people
no
that have ever
sense.
asked me to teach
But
them how
we
to make
adults
money.
are often too
I
proud
have more
to
than
admit that
150
something does not make
employees,
sense,
and not one of them
to us
has
young
asked
boys.
me what I know
Rich Dad
about money.
said,
They
what
ask me
defines
for
an
a
asset
job
are not
and a
words,
paycheck,
but
but
numbers.
never to teach
And
them
if
about
you
money.
can't read the numbers,
So most
you
will
can't
spend
tell
the
an
best
asset
years of their
from a hole in
lives
the ground.
working for money.
In accounting,
not really
Rich Dad would
understanding
say,
what it is
it's
they are
not the
working
numbers,
for.
but what the numbers
I
are
sat
telling
there
you.
listening
It's
intently.
just like words. So
It's not
when
the
Mike
words,
told me you
but the
wanted to
story
learn how to
the
make
words are
money,
telling you.
I decided
If
to
you want to
design
be
a
rich,
course that
you've
mirrored
got to
real
real
life
life.
and understand numbers.
I could talk until I was
if I
blue
heard
in
that
the face,
once, I
but
heard
you
it
wouldn't hear a
1,000
thing.
times from my
So
rich dad.
I decided to
and
let
I also
life push
heard
you around a
the
bit
rich
so
acquire
you could
assets,
hear me.
and the poor
That's
and middle
why I
class
only paid you
acquire
10 cents.
liabilities. So
here is
what
how
is the
to tell
lesson
the
I
difference
learned
between an
from
asset
working
and a
for only
liability.
10 cents an hour? I
Most
asked.
accountants and
That you're
financial
cheap
professionals
and
do not
exploit your
agree with the
workers?
definitions. But
Rich
these
Dad
simple
rocked
drawings
back
were the
and
start
laughed
of
heartily.
strong financial foundations.
Finally, he said,
for two young boys.
"You'd best change your point of view.
An asset
Stop
is
blaming
something
me
that puts
and
money
thinking
in my
I'm the
pocket.
problem. A liability
If you
is
think I'm
something
the
that takes
problem,
money out
then
of
you
my
have
pocket.
to change me.
This is really
If
all
you
you
realize
need to know.
that you're the problem,
If you want to be
then
rich,
you can change
simply
yourself.
spend your life
Learn something
buying assets
and grow wiser.
If you want to be poor or
Most
middle class,
people want
spend
everyone
your
else in
life
the world to
buying
change
liabilities.
but themselves.
Illiteracy,
Let me tell
both
you,
in words
it's
and
easier
numbers,
to
is
change
the
yourself
foundation of
than everyone
financial
else.
struggle. If
I don't
people are having
understand,
difficulties
I said.
financially, there is
Don't
something
blame me
that
for
they
your
don't
problems,
understand,
Rich Dad said,
either in
growing
words
impatient.
or numbers.
But you
The
only
rich
pay me
are
10
rich
cents.
because they are
So
more
what are
literate
you
in
learning,
different
Rich
areas
Dad
than
asked,
people who
smiling.
struggle financially.
That you're cheap.
So if you
I
want to
said
be
with a
rich and
sly
maintain
grin.
your wealth,
See,
it's
you
important to
think
be
I'm the
financially
problem,
literate
said Rich
in
Dad.
words
But
as
you
well as
are.
numbers.
Well,
Numbers
keep
alone
that attitude
mean
and
little,
you'll learn
just
nothing.
as words out of
Keep
context
the attitude
mean
that
little.
I'm the problem.
It's the
and what
story
choices
that
do you
counts.
have?
In financial
Well,
reporting,
if you don't pay me
reading
more
numbers
or
is
show me
looking
more
for the
respect
plot,
and teach me,
the story
I'll
of
quit.
where the cash is flowing.
Well put,
In
Rich Dad
80% of
said,
most families,
and that's
the
exactly
financial
what
story
most people
paints
do.
a picture of
They
hard
quit
work to
and
get
go
ahead.
looking for another job.
However,
A
this
better
effort is for
opportunity
naught
and higher
because
pay,
they spend their lives
actually
buying
thinking that this
liabilities
will solve the
instead of
problem.
assets.
In most cases,
Everyone
it
has
won't.
living expenses, the need
So
for food,
what should I do?
shelter,
I
and
asked.
clothing.
Just take
It
this
is the
measly
cash
10
flow
cents an
that
hour and
tells the
smile?
story of how a person
Rich Dad
handles their
smiled.
money.
That's what the
The
other
reason
people
I started
do.
with the story
But
of
that's
the
all
richest
they
man in
do,
America
waiting
is to
for a
illustrate
raise,
the flaw
thinking that more
in
money
believing that
will
money
solve
will
their
solve
problems.
all problems.
Most
That
just
is why I
accept it.
cringe
And
whenever
some
I
take
hear
a second
people ask
job
me how
working
to get
harder.
rich
But
quicker,
again,
or
accepting
where they
a
should
small
start.
paycheck.
I often hear,
I sat
I'm in
staring
debt,
at the floor,
so I need to make
beginning
more
to
money.
understand the lesson Rich
But
Dad
more
was
money
presenting.
will often not
I could
solve the
sense
problem.
it was a taste
In
of
fact,
life.
it may compound
Finally,
the
I
problem.
looked up and asked,
Money often
"So
makes
what will
obvious
solve
our
the problem?"
tragic human flaws.
This,
putting a
he said,
spotlight on
leaning
what we don't
forward
know.
in his chair
That
and
is
tapping
why,
me
all
gently
too
on the
often,
head.
a person who comes
This
into a
stuff
sudden
between
windfall
your
of cash,
ears.
let's say an inheritance,
It was at
a
that
pay
moment
raise,
that
or
Rich Dad
lottery
shared
winnings,
the pivotal
soon
point of view
returns to
that
the same
separated
financial
him
mess,
from his
if
employees
not worse,
and my
than
poor
the mess
dad,
they were in before,
and led him to eventually
Money
become
only
one of the
accentuates
richest
the cash
men in
flow
Hawaii,
pattern running in
while
your
my
head.
highly educated
If
but
your
poor
pattern
dad
is to spend
struggled
everything you
financially
get,
all his
most
life.
likely an increase in cash
It was a
will just
singular
result
point of
in an
view
increase
that
in
made
spending.
all the difference
Thus the
over a
saying,
lifetime.
a fool and his money
Rich
is
Dad
one big
said
party.
this point of view over and over.
I have said
which
many
I
times
call
that we go to
lesson number
school to
one.
gain scholastic
The
and
poor and the
professional
middle
skills,
class work
both of
for
which
money.
are important.
The rich
we learn
have
to
money
make
work
money
for them.
with our professional
On
skills.
that bright Saturday
In
morning,
the 1960s,
I learned a completely
when I was in high
different
school,
point of view
if someone
from
did
what
well
I had been
academically,
taught by my poor
people
dad.
assumed this bright
At the
student
age
will
of
go
9,
on to be a
I
medical
understood
doctor
that both
because
dads
it was the
wanted me to
profession
learn.
with the promise
Both
of the
dads
greatest financial
encouraged me to
reward.
study. But
Today,
not the same things.
doctors face financial
My
challenges
highly educated
I wouldn't wish
dad
on my worst
recommended
enemy.
that I do what he
Insurance
did.
companies taking
Son,
control
I
of the
want
business,
you to study hard,
managed
get good
healthcare,
grades,
government
so you can find a
intervention,
safe,
and
secure
malpractice
job
suits.
with a big company.
Today,
and make
kids
sure
want to be
it has
famous
excellent
athletes,
benefits.
movie stars,
My
rock
rich
stars,
dad
beauty
wanted me to
queens,
learn how
or
money works,
CEOs,
so I
because
could make
that
it
is where
work
the
for
fame,
me.
money, and prestige
These
are.
lessons I would learn
That is
through
the
life
reason
with his
it is
guidance,
so hard to
not
motivate kids
because
in
of a
school
classroom.
today. They know
My rich
that
dad
professional
continued
success
my first
is no
lesson.
longer solely
I'm
linked
glad you
to
got angry
academic
about
success,
working for 10
as
cents
it
an
once
hour.
was. If you hadn't got angry
Because
and had
students
simply
leave school
accepted it
without
without
I would
financial
have to
skills,
tell you that I could not
millions
teach
of
you.
educated people pursue
You see,
their profession
true
successfully,
learning takes energy,
but later
passion,
find themselves
and a burning
struggling
desire.
financially. Anger
They
is
work
a big
harder,
part of that
but
formula.
don't get ahead.
For passion,
What is
missing
anger
from their
and love
education
combined.
is not how to make money,
When it comes
but
to
how
money,
to manage
most
money.
people want to
It's
play it
called
safe and feel
financial
secure.
aptitude.
So
What
passion
you do
does not
with the
direct
money
them.
once you make
Fear
it
does.
How to keep people from taking
So
it
is that
from
why
you,
they'll take
how
jobs
to keep
with
it
low
longer,
pay?
and
I
how
asked.
to make that money work
Yes,
hard for you.
said Rich Dad.
Most
Some
people
say
don't
I
understand
exploit
why they
people
struggle
because I don't pay
financially
as much as
because
the
they
sugar
don't
plantation
understand
or
cash
the
flow.
government.
A person
say
can be
the
highly
people
educated,
exploit themselves.
professionally successful,
It's their fear,
and financially
not
illiterate. These people
But don't
often
you feel
work
you should
harder
pay
than
them
they
more?
need to,
I asked.
because they learned
I don't
how to
have
work
to.
hard,
But
and
besides,
not how to
more
have
money
their
will
money
not solve
solve their
hard for them.
problems. Just look at your dad.
The
He makes a
story
lot of
about
money,
the quest
and he still
for
can't pay
financial
his
dreams
bills.
turns into
Most
a
people,
financial nightmare.
given more money,
Only
the classic
get into
story of
more debt.
hardworking people has
So
set
that's
a pattern.
why the 10 cents an
Recently
hour,
married,
I said,
the
smiling,
happy, highly
is
educated
part
young
of the
couple
lesson.
moves into one of their
That's
cramped,
right,
rented
smiled
apartments.
Rich Dad.
Immediately,
You see,
they
your
realize
dad went to
that they are
school
saving
and
money
got an
because
excellent
two can
education
live as
so
cheaply
he
as
could
one.
get a high-paying job.
The problem is,
But
the
he
apartment
still
is
has
cramped
money problems
They decided
because he
to
never
save money
learned
to buy
anything
their
about
dream
money in
home
school.
so they can have kids.
On top of that,
they now
he
have two
believes
incomes
in working
and they
for money.
begin to focus on their
And
careers.
you don't? I asked.
Their incomes begin
No,
to increase.
not really, said
As
Rich
their
Dad.
incomes go up,
If you want to learn
their
to work for
expenses
money,
go up as
then
well.
stay in school.
The
That is a
number one
great
expense
place to
for
learn
most
to do
people
that.
is taxes.
But if you want to learn
Many
how to
people
have
think
money
it's
work
income
for
tax,
you,
but for most
then I will
Americans,
teach you that.
their highest tax
But only
is
if
Social
you want to
Security.
learn.
As an
Wouldn't
employee,
everyone want to
it
learn
appears
that?
as if
I
the
asked.
Social Security tax combined with
said
the
Rich
Medicare
Dad,
tax rate
simply
is roughly
because it's easier to learn to
7.5%.
work for money.
But it's
especially
really
if fear is your
15%,
primary
since the
emotion
employer must
when
be
the
subject
subject
of
of
money
Social
is
Security is
discussed. In essence,
I don't
it is money
understand,
the
I said with
employer
a frown.
can't pay you.
Don't worry
On top
about
of
that for now.
You still
Just
have to
know
pay income
that it's
tax on the
fear
amount
that keeps
deducted
most
from your
people
wages
working
for
at a
Social
job.
Security tax.
The fear of
Income
not paying
you
their
never
bills,
received
the fear
because it
of
went
being
directly
fired,
to Social
the fear
Security
of not
through
having
withholding.
enough money, and the fear
Going back
of
to the
starting
young
over.
couple, as a result of
That's
their
the price
incomes
of
increasing,
studying to
they
learn a
decide to
profession
buy
or
the house
trade
of their dreams.
and then working
Once
for money.
in their house, they have a new tax.
Most people
called
become
property
slave
tax.
to money, and then
they
get
buy
angry
a new
at their
car,
boss.
new furniture,
Learning
and new
to have money
appliances
work for
to
you
match
is
their
a
new house.
completely different course of
All
study.
of a sudden,
I asked.
they wake up and their liabilities
Absolutely,
column is
Rich
full
Dad
of
answered.
mortgage and credit card debt.
Absolutely.
Their liabilities
We sat in
go
the
up.
silence on that beautiful
They're
Hawaiian
now
Saturday
trapped
morning.
in the rat race.
My friends had
Pretty
just
soon,
started their
a
Little
baby
League
comes
baseball
along,
game,
and they work
but for
harder.
some reason,
The
I was
process
now
repeats
thankful
itself.
I had
Higher
decided to work
incomes
for
cause
10
higher
cents an hour.
taxes,
I
also
sensed
called
that I was
bracket
about
creep.
to learn something my
A
friends
credit card
wouldn't
comes in
learn
the
in
mail.
school.
They use it.
Ready to
it
learn?
maxes out.
Asked Rich Dad.
A loan company calls
Absolutely,
and says
I said
their
with a
greatest
grin.
asset, their home,
I have kept
has
my promise.
appreciated in value.
I've been teaching you
because
from
their
afar,
credit is
my
so
Rich
good.
Dad said.
The company offers
At
a
9
bill
years old,
consolidation
you've
loan
gotten a
and
taste
tells
of what
them
it
the
feels
intelligent
like
thing
to work
do
for money.
is clear off the high
Just
interest
multiply
consumer
your
debt
last
by
month
paying
by
off their
50
credit
years,
card,
and you will have an
besides,
idea
interest
of what
on their
most
home
people
is a
spend
tax
their life
deduction.
doing.
They go
I
for
don't
it
understand,
and pay
I
off
said.
those high-interest credit cards.
How did you feel
They
waiting
breathe
in
a
line
sigh
to
of
see me,
relief
once
that
to
credit
get hired,
cards are
and
paid
once
off.
to ask for more
They've
money?
now folded their consumer
Terrible,
debt
I said.
into their home mortgage.
If you choose
Their
to work
payments
for
go
money,
down because
that
they
is
extend
what
their
life
debt
will be
over
like,
30
said
years.
Rich Dad.
It is the smart thing
And
to
how
do.
did you feel when Mrs. Martin
Their
dropped
neighbor
3
calls to
dimes in your
invite them
hand
to go
for
shopping.
3 hours of
The
work?
Memorial Day sale is on.
I felt like it wasn't
They
enough.
promised themselves
It seemed like
they'll just
nothing.
window shop.
I was
but they
disappointed.
take a credit card,
I said,
just in case.
and that is how most
I
employees
run into this
feel
young couple
when they look
all
at their
the time.
paychecks. Their names
Especially
change,
after all
but
the
their
tax
financial
and other
dilemma
deductions
is
are
the
taken
same.
out. They
At
come
least
to
you
one of
got
my talks to hear
100%.
what I have to say.
You
They
mean
ask
most
me,
workers don't
"Can
get
you
paid
tell us how to
everything?"
make
I
more
asked
money?"
with amazement.
They don't understand that
Heavens
their
no,
trouble is
said Rich
really
Dad.
how they
The
choose
government
to spend the
always
money
takes
they do
its
have.
share first.
It is caused by
How do
financial
they do that?
illiteracy
I asked.
and not understanding
Taxes,
the difference
said Rich Dad.
between an asset
You're
and a
taxed
liability.
when you earn. You're taxed
More money
when you
seldom
spend.
solves
You're taxed
someone's
when you
money
save.
problems.
You're taxed
Intelligence
when you
solves
die.
problems.
Why
There
do
is a
people let the
saying a
government
friend of
do
mine
that
says
to them?
over and over to
The
people
rich
in debt.
don't, said Rich Dad
If you
with a smile.
find you have dug yourself
the poor
into
and the
a
middle
hole,
class do.
stop digging.
I'll bet you that I earn more than
As
your
a
dad,
child,
yet
my
he
dad
pays
often
more in
told us
taxes.
that the Japanese were aware of
How can
three
that be?
powers.
I asked.
The power of the
At
sword,
my age, that made
the
no
jewel,
sense to me.
and the mirror.
Why would someone
The
let
sword
the government
symbolizes
do that to
the
them?
power of weapons.
Rich Dad
America
rocked
has
slowly
spent
and
trillions of
silently
dollars
in his
on
chair,
weapons,
just
and
looking
because
at me.
of this, is a
Ready
powerful
to
military
learn? He
presence in the
asked.
world.
I nodded my head
The
slowly.
jewel symbolizes the
As
power
I said,
of money.
there is a lot to
There
learn.
is some degree of truth
Learning
to
how
the
to have
saying,
money work
"Remember
for
the
you
golden
is a
rule.
lifetime study.
He who has the gold
goal
Most people
makes
go to
the
college
rules.
for 4 years, and their
The
education
mirror
ends.
symbolizes the power
I
of
already know
self-knowledge.
that my study
This
of money will
self-knowledge,
continue over
according
my
to
lifetime.
Japanese legend,
simply
was the
because
most
the more I
treasured
find
of the
out,
three.
the more I find out I need to
All
know.
too often, the poor and
Most
middle
people
class
never
allow
study
the power of
subject.
money to
They
control
go to
them.
work, get
By
their
simply
paycheck,
getting up and
balance
working
their
checkbooks,
checkbooks, and
failing
that's
to
it.
ask themselves
Then
if what
they
they
wonder
do
why
makes
they
sense,
have money
they
problems.
shoot themselves in
They
the
think
foot as
that
they
more
leave for
money
work
will solve
every
the
morning.
problem.
and don't
by not
realize
fully
that
understanding
it's their
money.
lack of
The
financial
vast majority
education
of people
that is the
allow
problem.
its awesome power
So my
to
dad
control
has
them.
tax problems because he
If they
doesn't
used
understand
the
the
money,
power of the
I
mirror.
asked,
They would have
confused,
asked themselves,
"Look,
said
does
Rich
this
Dad,
make sense?
taxes are just
All
one
too
small
often,
section on
instead of
learning how
trusting
to
their
have
inner
money
wisdom,
work for you.
that genius inside,
Today, I just
most
wanted to
people
find out
follow
if you
the crowd.
still have the passion to learn
They do
about money,
things because
Most
everybody
people
else
don't.
does them.
They want
They
to go to
conform
school,
rather
learn
than
a
question.
profession, have fun at their
Often,
work,
they
and earn
mindlessly
lots of money.
repeat what they have been told.
One day they wake up
Diversify.
with big money
Your
problems,
home is an
and
asset.
then they can't stop
Your
working.
home is your biggest investment.
That's the price
You
of
get a
only
tax
knowing
break
how to work
for
for
going
money
into greater
instead
debt.
of studying how
Get a
to have
safe
money
job.
work for you.
Don't make mistakes.
So, do you still
Don't
have the
take
passion to
risks.
learn? Asked Rich Dad.
It is said that
I
the
nodded
fear
my
of
head.
public speaking is a
Good,
fear
said
greater
Rich
than
Dad.
death for
Now
most
get
people.
back to work.
According
This
to
time,
psychiatrists,
I will pay you nothing.
the fear of public speaking
What?
is
I
caused
asked
by
in
the fear
amazement.
of ostracism.
You heard
the fear
me.
of standing
Nothing.
out, the fear of
You will work
criticism,
the same 3
the fear
hours
of
every
ridicule,
Saturday,
and the fear
but this time
of being
you
an
will not be
outcast.
paid 10 cents per hour.
The fear of
you
being
said you
different
wanted to learn to
prevents
not
most
work for
people
money,
from seeking
so
new
I'm not
ways
going
to
to pay
solve
you
their
anything.
problems.
I couldn't
That
believe
is
what
why
I was
my
hearing.
educated dad said the
I've already
Japanese
had this conversation
value
with
the
Mike,
power of
and
the
he's
mirror
already working,
the most,
dusting
for
and
it is
stacking
only when
canned
we
goods
look
for
into
free.
it that we find
You better
truth.
hurry and get back there.
Fear
That's
is
not
the main
fair, I
reason that
shouted.
people say
You've got to
play
play
it
something.
safe. That goes
You
for
said
anything.
you
be
wanted
it
to learn.
sports,
If you
relationships,
don't learn this
careers,
now,
or
you'll
money.
grow up to be like the two
It
women
is
and
that
the older
same
man
fear,
sitting in
the
my living
fear
room,
of ostracism
working for money
that causes
and hoping
people to
I don't
conform
fire
to
them,
and not question,
or, like your dad,
commonly accepted
earning lots of
opinions or
money
popular
only
trends.
to be in debt up to his
Your
eyeballs,
home is an
hoping
asset.
more money will solve
Get a
the
bill
problem.
consolidation loan
If
and
that's
get
what
out
you
of
want,
debt.
I'll go back
Work
to our
harder.
original deal of
It's a
10 cents an
promotion.
hour.
Someday,
Or
I'll
you
be
can do
a
what
vice
most adults
president.
do.
Save
Complain
money.
that there is not
When
enough
I get
pay,
a raise,
quit,
I'll buy us a
and
bigger
go
house.
looking for another job.
Mutual funds are
But
safe.
what do I do? I asked.
Many financial problems
Rich Dad
are
tapped me
caused
on the
by
head.
trying to keep up with the
Use
Joneses.
this, he said.
Occasionally,
If you
we
use
all
it
need
well,
to look in the
you will
mirror
soon
and be
thank
true
me
to
for
our
giving
inner
you an
wisdom
opportunity,
rather
and you
than
will
our
grow
fears.
into a rich man.
By the time Mike and I were
I
16
stood
years
there,
old,
still
we
not
began to
believing
have
what a raw
problems in
deal I
school.
was handed.
We
I
were
came
not
to
bad
ask for a
kids.
raise,
We just
and
began
somehow
to separate
I was
from the
instead
crowd.
working for nothing.
We worked for Mike's
Rich
dad
Dad
after
tapped
school
me on the head
and on
again and
weekends.
said,
Mike and
"Use
I
this.
often spent
Now,
hours
get out of
after
here and
work
get back
just
to work."
sitting at a table with his dad while he held
Lesson
meetings with
number
his
one.
bankers,
The
attorneys,
rich don't
accountants,
work for money.
brokers, investors,
I didn't
managers,
tell my poor
and
dad
employees.
I wasn't being paid.
Here was a
He
man
wouldn't
who
have
had left
understood,
school at 13,
and I didn't want to try to
who was now
explain something
directing,
I didn't
instructing,
understand myself.
ordering, and asking
For 3
questions
more
of
weeks,
educated people.
Mike and I worked 3
They
hours
came at his
every
beck and
Saturday
call
for
and
nothing.
cringed when he didn't
The work
approve
didn't
of
bother
them.
me, and the routine
Here
got
was a
easier.
man who had
But
not
it was
gone
the missed
along with the
baseball
crowd.
games and not being
He was
able
a
to
man who
afford
did
to
his
buy
own
a few
thinking
comic books
and
that got to
detested
me.
the words, "We have
Rich
to
Dad
do it
stopped
this
by
way
at
because
noon on
that's
the
the
third
way
week.
everyone else does it."
We heard his truck
He
pull up in
also
the parking
hated
lot
the word
and sputter
"can't."
when the engine was turned off.
If you wanted him to do
He
something,
entered the store
just say,
and greeted Mrs.
"I
Martin
don't
with
think
a
you
hug.
can do it."
After finding out
Mike
how
and I
things were
learned
going
more
in the
sitting
store,
in on his
he
meetings
reached into
than
the
we
ice
did
cream
in all
freezer,
our years of
pulled out
school,
2 bars,
college
paid for
included.
them, and signaled
Mike's
to Mike
dad
and
was
me.
not book smart, but
"Let's
he
go
was
for a walk,
financially
boys."
educated and
We
successful
crossed the street,
as a result.
dodging a few
He
cars,
told us
and
over
walked
and
across
over
a large
again,
grassy
an
field where a
intelligent
few adults
person
were playing
hires people
softball.
who are more intelligent
Sitting
than
down
he
at a
is.
lone picnic table,
So Mike and
he
I had
handed
the
Mike and
benefit
me the
of
treats.
spending hours listening
"How's
to
it going,
and
boys?"
learning from
"Okay,"
intelligent
Mike
people.
said. I nodded
But
in
because
agreement.
of this, Mike and I
"Learn
couldn't go
anything yet?"
along with the
Rich
standard
Dad asked.
dogma our teachers preached.
Mike and I looked
and
at
that
each other,
caused problems.
shrugged our shoulders, and
Whenever
shook our
the
heads
teacher
in
said,
unison.
"If you don't get good grades, you won't do well in
Avoiding
the
one
real
of
world,"
life's biggest
Mike and I
traps.
just raised our eyebrows.
"Well, you
When
boys
we were
had better
told
start
to follow
thinking.
set procedures,
You're staring
and
at
not
one of life's
deviate
biggest
from the rules,
lessons.
we could
If
see
you
how
learn it,
school
you'll enjoy
discouraged
a life of
creativity.
great freedom and
We
security.
started to understand why
If you
our
don't,
rich dad
you'll
told
wind
us
up
that
like
schools
Mrs.
were
Martin
designed to
and most of
produce
the people
employees
playing softball
instead
in
of
this park.
employers.
They work very
Occasionally,
hard
Mike
for
or
little
I would
money,
ask our teachers
clinging
how
to the
what we
illusion of
studied
job security
was applicable
and
to the
looking
real
forward
world,
to a 3-week
or
vacation
why we
each
never
year,
studied
and
money
maybe
and how
a
it
skimpy
worked.
pension after
To the
45
latter
years of
question,
service.
we often got the
If that
answer that
excites
money
you,
was not
I'll give you a
important,
raise to
that if
25
we
cents
excelled
an
in our
hour.
education, the money
But
would
these
follow.
are good, hard-working people.
The more we
are you
knew
making
about
fun
the
of
power
them?
of money,
I demanded.
The more distant we grew
smile
from the
came over
teachers
Rich Dad's
and our
face.
classmates.
Mrs. Martin is like
My
a mother
highly
to
educated
me.
dad
I
never
would never
pressured
be
me
that
about
cruel.
my grades.
I
but
may
we did
sound
begin to
unkind
argue about money.
because I'm doing my best
By the
to
time
point
I was
something out to the
16,
two of you.
I probably had
I
a
want
far
to
better
expand
foundation
your
with
point of
money
view
than both
so
my
you
parents.
can see something most
I
people
could keep
never have the
books
benefit
I've
of
seen
seeing
to
because
tax
their vision
accountants,
is too
corporate
narrow.
attorneys,
Most
bankers,
people
real estate
never see
brokers,
the trap
investors,
they're in.
and so forth.
Mike and I
By
sat
contrast,
there, uncertain
my dad
of his
talked
message.
to other teachers.
He sounded cruel.
One day,
yet we could
my
sense
dad
he
told
was
me that
trying
our
to
home
drive
was
home
his
a
greatest
point.
investment. A
With
not
a
too
smile,
pleasant argument
Rich
took
Dad said,
place when I
"Doesn't
showed
that
him
25
why I
cents
thought a
an hour
house
sound good?
was not a good investment.
Doesn't it make your heart beat a little
I
faster?"
showed him the ancillary
I shook my
expenses
head no,
that went
but
along
it
with
really
owning
did.
the home.
25
bigger
cents an
home
hour would
meant
be
bigger
big bucks to me.
expenses, and the cash flow kept
Okay,
going out
I'll pay
through
you
the
$1
expense
an
column.
hour, Rich Dad said,
Today,
with a sly
people
grin.
still challenge me on the
Now
idea
my
of a
heart
house
started to
not
race.
being an asset.
My brain was screaming,
I know that
"Take
for
it,
many people,
take it."
it is their dream
I
as
could
well
not
as their
believe
largest
what I was
investment.
hearing.
And
Still,
owning your
I
own
said
home
nothing.
is better than nothing.
Okay,
I simply offer
$2 an hour.
an alternative way of
My
looking
little
at this
brain and
popular
heart
dogma.
nearly exploded.
If my wife and
After
I were
all,
to
it
buy
was
a bigger,
1956,
flashier house,
and being paid
we
$2
realized
an
it
hour
wouldn't
would have
be an
made me the
asset.
richest kid
It
in the
would be a
world.
liability,
I couldn't
since it would
imagine
take money
earning that
out
kind
of our
of money.
pocket.
I wanted to
So
say yes.
here is the argument
I wanted the
I put
deal.
forth.
I could picture
really
a new
don't expect
bicycle,
most
new
people
baseball
to agree
glove,
with it,
and the
because your
adoration of
home
my
is an
friends when I
emotional
flashed
thing.
some cash.
And when it comes to money,
On
high
top of
emotions
that,
tend
Jimmy
to lower
and his rich
financial
friends could
intelligence.
never call me poor
I know
again.
from personal
But
experience
somehow
that
my
money has a
mouth
way of
stayed
making
shut.
every decision
The ice cream had
emotional.
melted and was running down my hand.
When it comes
Rich
to
Dad
houses,
was looking at
most
two
people
boys
work all
staring
their
back
lives
at him,
paying for
eyes
a home
wide
they
open
never own.
and brains empty.
In other words, most
He was
people buy
testing
a
us,
new house
and
every
he
few
knew
years.
there was a part of
each
our
time
emotions that
incurring
wanted
a
to
new
take the deal.
30-year loan to pay off
He
the previous
understood
one.
that every
Two,
person has a weak
even
and
though
needy
people
part of
receive
their
a
soul
tax
that can be
deduction for
bought.
interest on mortgage payments, they pay for all their other expenses with after-tax dollars, even after they pay off their mortgage. 3. My wife's parents were shocked when the property taxes on their home increased to $1,000 a month. This was after they had retired, so the increase put a strain on their retirement budget and they felt forced to move. 4. Houses do not always go up in value. I have friends who owe $1 million for a home that today would sell for far less. 5. The greatest losses of all are those from missed opportunities. If all your money is tied up in your house, you may be forced to work harder because your money continues blowing out of the expense column instead of adding to the asset column, the classic middle-class cash flow pattern. If a young couple would put more money into their asset column early on, their later years would be easier. Their assets would have grown and would be available to help cover expenses. All too often, a house only serves as a vehicle for incurring a home equity loan to pay for mounting expenses. In summary, the end result in making a decision to own a house that is too expensive in lieu of starting an investment portfolio impacts an individual in at least the following 3 ways. 1. Loss of time during which other assets could have grown in value. 2. Loss of additional capital which could have been invested instead of paying for high-maintenance expenses related directly to the home. 3. Loss of education. Too often, people count their house and savings and retirement plans as all they have in their asset column. And he knew that every individual also had a part of their soul that was resilient and could never be bought. It was only a question of which one was stronger. Okay, $5 an hour. Suddenly, I was silent. Something had changed. The offer was too big and ridiculous. Not many grown-ups in 1956 made more than that, but quickly my temptation disappeared and calm set in. Slowly, I turned to my left to look at Mike. He looked back at me. The part of my soul that was weak and needy was silenced. The part of me that had no price took over. I knew Mike had gotten to that point too. Good, said Rich Dad softly. Most people have a price, and they have a price because of human emotions named fear and greed. First, the fear of being without money motivates us to work hard, and then, once we get that paycheck, greed or desire starts us thinking about all the wonderful things money can buy. The pattern is then set. What pattern? I asked. The pattern of get up, go to work, pay bills, get up, go to work, pay bills. People's lives are forever controlled by two emotions, fear and greed. Offer them more money, and they continue the cycle by increasing their spending. This is what I call the rat race. There is another way? Mike asked. Yes, said Rich Dad slowly, but only a few people find it. And what is that way? Mike asked. That's what I hope you boys will learn as you work and study with me. That is why I took away all forms of pay. Any hints? Mike asked. We're kind of tired of working hard, especially for nothing. Well, the first step is telling the truth, said Rich Dad. We haven't been lying, I said. I did not say you were lying. I said to tell the truth, Rich Dad retorted. The truth about what? I asked. How you're feeling, Rich Dad said. You don't have to say it to anyone else. Just admit it to yourself. You mean the people in this park, the people who work for you, Mrs. Martin, they don't do that? I asked. I doubt it, said Rich Dad. Instead, they feel the fear of not having money. They don't confront it logically. They react emotionally instead of using their heads, Rich Dad said. Then, they get a few bucks in their hands, and again, the emotions of joy, desire, and greed take over. And again they react instead of think. So their emotions control their brain, Mike said. That's correct, said Rich Dad. Instead of admitting the truth about how they feel, they react to their feelings and fail to think. They feel the fear, so they go to work, hoping that money will soothe the fear, but it doesn't. It continues to haunt them, and they return to work, hoping again that money will calm their fears, and again it doesn't. Fear keeps them in this trap of working, earning money, hoping the fear will go away. But every day they get up, and that old fear wakes up with them. For millions of people, that old fear keeps them awake all night, causing a night of turmoil and worry. So they get up and go to work, hoping that a paycheck will kill that fear gnawing at their souls. Money is running their lives, and they refuse to tell the truth about that. Money is in control of their emotions and their souls. Rich Dad sat quietly, letting his words sink in. Mike and I had heard what he said, but didn't understand fully what he was talking about. I just knew that I often wondered why grown-ups hurried off to work. It did not seem like much fun, and they never looked that happy, but something kept them going. Realizing we had absorbed as much as possible of what he was talking about, Rich Dad said, I want you boys to avoid that trap. That is really what I want to teach you. Not just to be rich, because being rich does not solve the problem. It doesn't? I asked, surprised. No, it doesn't. Let me explain the other emotion, desire. Some call it greed, but I prefer desire. It's perfectly normal to desire something better, prettier, more fun, or exciting. So people also work for money because of desire. They desire money for the joy they think it can buy. But the joy that money brings is often short-lived, and they soon need more money for more joy, more pleasure, more comfort, and more security. So they keep working, thinking money will soothe their souls that are troubled by fear and desire. But money can't do that. Even rich people do this? Mike asked. Rich people included, said Rich Dad. In fact, the reason many rich people are rich isn't because of desire, but because of fear. They believe that money can eliminate the fear of being poor, so they amass tons of it, only to find the fear gets worse. Now they fear losing the money. I have friends who keep working even though they have plenty. I know people who have millions who are more afraid now than when they were poor. They're terrified of losing it all. The fears that drove them to get rich got worse. That weak and needy part of their soul is actually screaming louder. They don't want to lose the big houses, the cars, and the high life money has bought them. They worry about what their friends would say if they lost all their money. Many are emotionally desperate and neurotic, although they look rich and have more money. So, is a poor man happier? I asked. No, I don't think so, replied Rich Dad. The avoidance of money is just as psychotic as being attached to money. As if on cue, the town derelict went past our table, stopping by the large rubbish can and rummaging around in it. The three of us watched him with great interest, when before we probably would have just ignored him. Rich Dad pulled $1 out of his wallet and gestured to the older man. Seeing the money, the derelict came over immediately, took the bill, thanked Rich Dad profusely, and hurried off, ecstatic with his good fortune. He's not much different from most of my employees, said Rich Dad. I've met so many people who say, "Oh, I'm not interested in money," yet they'll work at a job for 8 hours a day. That's a denial of truth. If they weren't interested in money, then why are they working? That kind of thinking is probably more psychotic than a person who hoards money. As I sat there listening to my Rich Dad, my mind flashed back to the countless times my own dad said, "I'm not interested in money." He said those words often. He also covered himself by always saying, "I work because I love my job." So, what do we do? I asked. Not work for money until all traces of fear and greed are gone? No, that would be a waste of time, said Rich Dad. Emotions are what make us human. The word emotion stands for energy in motion. Be truthful about your emotions and use your mind and emotions in your favor, not against yourself. Whoa, said Mike. Don't worry about what I just said. It will make more sense in years to come. Just be an observer, not a reactor, to your emotions. Most people do not know that it's their emotions that are doing the thinking. Your emotions are your emotions, but you have got to learn to do your own thinking. Can you give me an example? I asked. Sure, replied Rich Dad. When a person says, I need to find a job, it's most likely an emotion doing the thinking. Fear of not having money generates that thought. But people do need money if they have bills to pay, I said. Sure they do, smiled Rich Dad. All I'm saying is that it's fear that is all too often doing the thinking. I don't understand, said Mike. For example, said Rich Dad, if the fear of not having enough money arises, instead of immediately running out to get a job, they instead might ask themselves this question. Will a job be the best solution to this fear over the long run? In my opinion, the answer is no. A job is really a short-term solution to a long-term problem. But my dad is always saying, stay in school and get good grades so you can find a safe, secure job, I interjected, somewhat confused. Yes, I understand he says that, said Rich Dad, smiling. Most people recommend that, and it's a good path for most people. But people make that recommendation primarily out of fear. You mean my dad says that because he's afraid? Yes, said Rich Dad. He's terrified that you won't earn enough money and won't fit into society. Don't get me wrong. He loves you and wants the best for you. I, too, believe an education and a job are important, but it won't handle the fear. You see, that same fear that makes him get up in the morning to earn a few bucks is the fear that is causing him to be so fanatical about your going to school. So what do you recommend? I asked. I want to teach you to master the power of money instead of being afraid of it. They don't teach that in school, and if you don't learn it, you become a slave to money. It was finally making sense. He wanted us to widen our views and to see what the Mrs. Martins of this world couldn't see. He used examples that sounded cruel at the time, but I've never forgotten them. My vision widened that day, and I began to see the trap that lay ahead for most people. You see, we're all employees ultimately. We just work at different levels, said Rich Dad. I just want you boys to have a chance to avoid the trap caused by those two emotions, fear and desire. Use them in your favor, not against you. That's what I want to teach you. I'm not interested in just teaching you to make a pile of money. That won't handle the fear or desire. If you don't first handle fear and desire, and you get rich, you'll only be a highly paid slave. So how do we avoid the trap? I asked. The main cause of poverty or financial struggle is fear and ignorance, not the economy or the government or the rich. It's self-inflicted fear and ignorance that keep people trapped. So you boys go to school and get your college degrees, and I'll teach you how to stay out of the trap. The pieces of the puzzle were appearing. My highly educated dad had a great education and a great career, but school never told him how to handle money or his fear of it. It became clear that I could learn different and important things from two fathers. So you've been talking about the fear of not having money. How does the desire for money affect our thinking? Mike asked. How did you feel when I tempted you with a pay raise? Did you notice your desires rising? We nodded our heads. By not giving in to your emotions, you were able to delay your reactions and think. That is important. We will always have emotions of fear and greed. From here on in, it's imperative for you to use those emotions to your advantage, and for the long term to not let your emotions control your thinking. Most people use fear and greed against themselves. That's the start of ignorance. Most people live their lives chasing paychecks, pay raises, and job security because of the emotions of desire and fear, not really questioning where those emotion-driven thoughts are leading them. It's just like the picture of a donkey dragging a cart with its owner dangling a carrot just in front of its nose. The donkey's owner may be going where he wants to, but the donkey is chasing an illusion. Tomorrow, there will only be another carrot for the donkey. You mean the moment I pictured a new baseball glove, candy, and toys, that's like a carrot to a donkey? Mike asked. Yes, and as you get older, your toys get more expensive. A new car, a boat, and a big house to impress your friends, said Rich Dad with a smile. Fear pushes you out the door, and desire calls to you. That's the trap. So what's the answer? Mike asked. What intensifies fear and desire is ignorance. That is why rich people with lots of money often have more fear the richer they get. Money is the carrot, the illusion. If the donkey could see the whole picture, it might rethink its choice to chase the carrot. Rich Dad went on to explain that a human's life is a struggle between ignorance and illumination. He explained that once a person stops searching for information and self-knowledge, ignorance sets in. That struggle is a moment-to-moment decision to learn to open or close one's mind. Look, school is very important. You go to school to learn a skill or profession to become a contributing member of society. Every culture needs teachers, doctors, mechanics, artists, cooks, business people, police officers, firefighters, and soldiers. Schools train them so society can thrive and flourish, said Rich Dad. Unfortunately, for many people, school is the end, not the beginning. There was a long silence. Rich Dad was smiling. I didn't comprehend everything he said that day, but, as with most great teachers, his words continued to teach for years. I've been a little cruel today, said Rich Dad, but I want you to always remember this talk. I want you to always think of Mrs. Martin, and I want you always to remember that donkey. Never forget that fear and desire can lead you into life's biggest trap if you are not aware of them controlling your thinking. To spend your life living in fear, never exploring your dreams, is cruel.
To work hard for money, thinking that it will buy you things that will make you happy, is also cruel. To wake up in the middle of the night terrified about paying bills is a horrible way to live. To live a life dictated by the size of a paycheck is not really living a life. Thinking that a job makes you secure is lying to yourself. That's cruel, and that's the trap I want you to avoid. I've seen how money runs people's lives. Don't let that happen to you. Please, don't let money run your life. A softball rolled under our table. Rich Dad picked it up and threw it back. So what does ignorance have to do with greed and fear? I asked. Because it is ignorance about money that causes so much greed and fear, said Rich Dad. Let me give you some examples. A doctor, wanting more money to better provide for his family, raises his fees. By raising his fees, it makes healthcare more expensive for everyone. It hurts the poor people the most, so they have worse health than those with money. Because the doctors raise their fees, the attorneys raise their fees. Because the attorneys' fees have gone up, school teachers want a raise, which raises our taxes, and on and on and on. Soon, there will be such a horrifying gap between the rich and the poor that chaos will break out and another great civilization will collapse. History proves that great civilizations collapse when the gap between the haves and have-nots is too great. Sadly, America is on that same course because we haven't learned from history. We only memorize historical dates and names, not the lesson. Aren't prices supposed to go up? I asked. In an educated society with a well-run government, prices should actually come down. Of course, that is often only true in theory. Prices go up because of greed and fear caused by ignorance. If schools taught people about money, there would be more money and lower prices. But schools focus only on teaching people to work for money, not how to harness money's power. But don't we have business schools? Mike asked. And haven't you encouraged me to go for my MBA? Yes, said Rich Dad, but all too often business schools train employees to become sophisticated bean counters. Heaven forbid a bean counter takes over a business. All they do is look at the numbers, fire people, and kill the business. I know this because I hire bean counters. All they think about is cutting costs and raising prices, which cause more problems. Bean counting is important. I wish more people knew it, but it, too, is not the whole picture, added Rich Dad angrily. So, is there an answer? Asked Mike. Yes, said Rich Dad. Learn to use your emotions to think, not think with your emotions. When you boys mastered your emotions by agreeing to work for free, I knew there was hope. When you again resisted your emotions when I tempted you with more money, you were again learning to think in spite of being emotionally charged. That's the first step. Why is that step so important? I asked. Well, that's up to you to find out. If you want to learn, I'll take you boys into the briar patch, a place almost everyone else avoids. If you go with me, you'll let go of the idea of working for money and instead learn to have money work for you. And what will we get if we go with you? What if we agree to learn from you? What will we get? I asked. The same thing Brer Rabbit got, said Rich Dad, referring to the classic children's story. Is there a briar patch? I asked. Yes, said Rich Dad. The briar patch is our fear and greed. Confronting fear, weaknesses, and neediness by choosing our own thoughts is the way out. Choosing our thoughts? Mike asked, puzzled. Yes, choosing what we think rather than reacting to our emotions. Instead of just getting up and going to work because not having the money to pay your bills is scaring you, ask yourself, is working harder at this the best solution to this problem? Most people are too afraid to rationally think things through and instead run out the door to a job they hate. The tar baby is in control. That's what I mean by choosing your thoughts.
"And how do we do that?" Mike asked. "That's what I will teach you. I'll teach you to have a choice of thoughts rather than a knee-jerk reaction, like gulping down your morning coffee and running out the door. Remember what I said before. A job is only a short-term solution to a long-term problem. Most people have only one problem in mind, and it's short-term. It's the bills at the end of the month, the tar baby. Money controls their lives, or should I say the fear and ignorance about money controls it. So they do as their parents did. They get up every day and go work for money, not taking the time to ask the question, is there another way? Their emotions now control their thinking, not their heads. Can you tell the difference between emotions thinking and the head thinking? Mike asked. Oh yes, I hear it all the time, said Rich Dad. I hear things like, well, everyone has to work, or the rich are crooks, or I'll get another job, I deserve this raise, you can't push me around, or I like this job because it's secure. No one asks, is there something I'm missing here? Which would break through the emotional thought and give you time to think clearly. As we headed back to the store, Rich Dad explained that the rich really did make money. They did not work for it. He went on to explain that when Mike and I were casting 5-cent pieces out of lead, thinking we were making money, we were very close to thinking the way the rich think. The problem was that creating money is legal for the government and banks to do, but illegal for us to do. There are legal ways to create money from nothing, he told us. Rich Dad went on to explain that the rich know that money is an illusion, truly like the carrot for the donkey. It's only out of fear and greed that the illusion of money is held together by billions of people who believe that money is real. It's not. Money is really made up. It is only because of the illusion of confidence and the ignorance of the masses that this house of cards stands. He talked about the gold standard that America was on, and that each dollar bill was actually a silver certificate. What concerned him was the rumor that we would someday go off the gold standard and our dollars would no longer be backed by something tangible. If that happens, boys, all hell will break loose. The poor, the middle class, and the ignorant will have their lives ruined simply because they will continue to believe that money is real and that the company they work for, or the government, will look after them. We really did not understand what he was saying that day, but over the years, it made more and more sense. Seeing what others miss. As he climbed into his pickup truck outside his convenience store, Rich Dad said, "Keep working, boys, but the sooner you forget about needing a paycheck, the easier your adult life will be. Keep using your brain, work for free, and soon your mind will show you ways of making money far beyond what I could ever pay you. You will see things that other people never see. Most people never see these opportunities because they're looking for money and security, so that's all they get. The moment you see one opportunity, you'll see them for the rest of your life. The moment you do that, I'll teach you something else. Learn this, and you'll avoid one of life's biggest traps." Mike and I picked up our things from the store and waved goodbye to Mrs. Martin. We went back to the park, to the same picnic bench, and spent several more hours thinking and talking. We spent the next week at school thinking and talking too. For 2 more weeks, we kept thinking, talking, and working for free. At the end of the second Saturday, I was again saying goodbye to Mrs. Martin and looking at the comic book stand with a longing gaze. The hard thing about not even getting 30 cents every Saturday was that I didn't have any money to buy comic books. Suddenly, as Mrs. Martin said goodbye to Mike and me, I saw her do something I'd never seen her do before. Mrs. Martin was cutting the front page of the comic book in half. She kept the top half of the comic book cover and threw the rest of the book into a large cardboard box. When I asked her what she did with the comic books, she said, "I throw them away. I give the top half of the cover back to the comic book distributor for credit when he brings in the new comics. He's coming in an hour. Mike and I waited for an hour. Soon the distributor arrived, and I asked him if we could have the comic books. To my delight, he said, "You can have them if you work for this store and do not resell them." Remember our old business partnership? Well, Mike and I revived it. Using a spare room in Mike's basement, we began piling hundreds of comic books in that room. Soon, our comic book library was open to the public. We hired Mike's younger sister, who loved to study, to be head librarian. She charged each child 10 cents admission to the library, which was open from 2:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. every day after school. The customers, the children of the neighborhood, could read as many comics as they wanted in 2 hours. It was a bargain for them since a comic cost 10 cents each, and they could read 5 or 6 in 2 hours. Mike's sister would check the kids as they left to make sure they weren't borrowing any comic books. She also kept the books, logging in how many kids showed up each day, who they were, and any comments they might have. Mike and I averaged $9.50 per week over a 3-month period. We paid his sister $1 a week and allowed her to read the comics for free, which she rarely did since she was always studying. Mike and I kept our agreement by working in the store every Saturday and collecting all the comic books from the different stores. We kept our agreement to the distributor by not selling any comic books. We burned them once they got too tattered. We tried opening a branch office, but we could never quite find someone as trustworthy and dedicated as Mike's sister. At an early age, we found out how hard it was to find good staff. 3 months after the library first opened, a fight broke out in the room. Some bullies from another neighborhood pushed their way in, and Mike's dad suggested we shut down the business. So our comic book business shut down, and we stopped working on Saturdays at the convenience store. But Rich Dad was excited because he had new things he wanted to teach us. He was happy because we had learned our first lessons so well. We learned to make money work for us. By not getting paid for our work at the store, we were forced to use our imaginations to identify an opportunity to make money. By starting our own business, the comic book library, we were in control of our own finances, not dependent on an employer. The best part was that our business generated money for us even when we weren't physically there. Our money worked for us. Instead of paying us money, Rich Dad had given us so much more. Chapter 2. Lesson 2. Why teach financial literacy? It's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. In 1990, Mike took over his father's empire and is, in fact, doing a better job than his dad did. We see each other once or twice a year on the golf course. He and his wife are wealthier than you can imagine. Rich Dad's empire is in great hands, and Mike is now grooming his son to take his place, as his dad had groomed us. In 1994, I retired at the age of 47, and my wife Kim was 37. Retirement does not mean not working. For us, it means that, barring unforeseen cataclysmic changes, we can work or not work, and our wealth grows automatically, staying ahead of inflation. Our assets are large enough to grow by themselves. It's like planting a tree. You water it for years, and then one day it doesn't need you anymore. Its roots are implanted deep enough. Then the tree provides shade for your enjoyment. Mike chose to run the empire, and I chose to retire. Whenever I speak to groups of people, they often ask what I would recommend that they do. How do I get started? Is there a book you would recommend? What should I do to prepare my children? What is your secret to success? How do I make millions? Whenever I hear one of these questions, I'm reminded of the following story. The Richest Businessmen. In 1923, a group of our greatest leaders and richest businessmen held a meeting at the Edgewater Beach Hotel in Chicago. Among them were Charles Schwab, head of the largest independent steel company; Samuel Insull, president of the world's largest utility; Howard Hobson, head of the largest gas company; Ivar Kruger, president of International Match Company, one of the world's largest companies at that time; Leon Fraser, president of the Bank of International Settlements; Richard Whitney, president of the New York Stock Exchange; Arthur Cotton and Jesse Livermore, two of the biggest stock speculators; and Albert Fall, a member of President Harding's cabinet. 25 years later, 9 of these titans ended their lives as follows. Schwab died penniless after living for 5 years on borrowed money. Insull died broke in a foreign land, and Kruger and Cotton also died broke. Hobson went insane. Whitney and Albert Fall were released from prison, and Fraser and Livermore committed suicide. I doubt if anyone can say what really happened to these men. If you look at the date, 1923, it was just before the 1929 market crash and the Great Depression, which I suspect had a great impact on these men and their lives. The point is this. Today, we live in times of greater and faster change than these men did. I suspect there will be many booms and busts in the coming years that will parallel the ups and downs these men faced. I am concerned that too many people are too focused on money and not on their greatest wealth, their education. If people are prepared to be flexible, keep an open mind, and learn, they will grow richer and richer despite tough changes. If they think money will solve problems, they will have a rough ride. Intelligence solves problems and produces money. Money without financial intelligence is money soon gone. Most people fail to realize that in life, it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. We've all heard stories of lottery winners who are poor, then suddenly rich, and then poor again. They win millions, yet are soon back where they started. Or stories of professional athletes who at the age of 24 are earning millions but are sleeping under a bridge 10 years later. I remember a story of a young basketball player who a year ago had millions. Today, at just 29, he claims his friends, attorney, and accountant took his money and he was forced to work at a car wash for minimum wage. He was fired from the car wash because he refused to take off his championship ring as he was wiping off the cars. His story made national news, and he is appealing his termination, claiming hardship and discrimination. He claims that the ring is all he has left, and if it was stripped away, he'll crumble. I know so many people who became instant millionaires, and while I am glad some people have become richer and richer, I caution them that in the long run, it's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep and how many generations you keep it. So when people ask, "Where do I get started?" or "Tell me how to get rich quick," they often are greatly disappointed with my answer. I simply say to them what my rich dad said to me when I was a little kid. If you want to be rich, you need to be financially literate. That idea was drummed into my head every time we were together. As I said, my educated dad stressed the importance of reading books, while my rich dad stressed the need to master financial literacy. If you are going to build the Empire State Building, the first thing you need to do is dig a deep hole and pour a strong foundation. If you are going to build a home in the suburbs, all you need to do is pour a 6-inch slab of concrete. Most people, in their drive to get rich, are trying to build an Empire State Building on a 6-inch slab. Our school system, created in the agrarian age, still believes in homes with no foundation. Dirt floors are still the rage. So kids graduate from school with virtually no financial foundation. One day, sleepless and deep in debt in suburbia, living the American dream, they decide that the answer to their financial problems is to find a way to get rich quick. construction on the skyscraper begins. It goes up quickly, and soon, instead of the Empire State Building, we have the Leaning Tower of Suburbia. The sleepless nights return. As for Mike and me in our adult years, both of our choices were possible because we were taught to pour a strong financial foundation when we were just kids. Accounting is possibly the most confusing, boring subject in the world, but if you want to be rich long-term, it could be the most important subject. For Rich Dad, the question was how to take a boring and confusing subject and teach it to kids. The answer he found was to make it simple by teaching it in pictures. My Rich Dad poured a strong financial foundation for Mike and me. Since we were just kids, he created a simple way to teach us. For years, he only drew pictures and used few words. Mike and I understood the simple drawings, the jargon, the movement of money, and then in later years, Rich Dad began adding numbers. Today, Mike has gone on to master much more complex and sophisticated accounting analysis because he had to in order to run his empire. I am not as sophisticated because my empire is smaller, yet we come from the same simple foundation. Over the following pages, we will discuss those same simple line drawings Mike's dad created for us. Though basic, those drawings helped guide two little boys in building great sums of wealth on a solid and deep foundation. Rule number 1. You must know the difference between an asset and a liability, and buy assets. If you want to be rich, this is all you need to know. It is rule number 1. It is the only rule. This may sound absurdly simple, but most people have no idea how profound this rule is. Most people struggle financially because they do not know the difference between an asset and a liability. Rich people acquire assets. The poor and middle class acquire liabilities that they think are assets, said Rich Dad. When Rich Dad explained this to Mike and me, we thought he was kidding. Here we were, nearly teenagers, and waiting for the secret to getting rich. And this was his answer. It was so simple that we stopped for a long time to think about it. "What is an asset?" asked Mike. "Don't worry right now," said Rich Dad. "Just let the idea sink in. If you can comprehend the simplicity, your life will have a plan and be financially easy. It is simple. That is why the idea is missed." "You mean all we need to know is what an asset is, acquire them, and we'll be rich?" I asked. Rich Dad nodded his head. "It's that simple." "If it's that simple, how come everyone is not rich?" I asked. Rich Dad smiled. "Because people do not know the difference between an asset and a liability." I remember asking, how could adults be so misguided? If it is that simple, if it is that important, why would everyone not want to find out? It took Rich Dad only a few minutes to explain what assets and liabilities were. As an adult, I have difficulty explaining it to other adults. The simplicity of the idea escapes them because they have been educated differently. They were taught by other educated professionals, such as bankers, accountants, real estate agents, financial planners, and so forth. The difficulty comes in asking adults to unlearn or become children again. An intelligent adult often feels it is demeaning to pay attention to simplistic definitions. Rich Dad believed in the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid, or keep it super simple. So he kept it simple for us, and that made our financial foundation strong. So what causes the confusion? How could something so simple be so screwed up? Why would someone buy an asset that was really a liability? The answer is found in basic education. We focus on the word literacy and not financial literacy. What defines something to be an asset or a liability are not words. In fact, if you really want to be confused, look up the words asset and liability in the dictionary. I know the definition may sound good to a trained accountant, but for the average person, it makes no sense. but we adults are often too proud to admit that something does not make sense. To us young boys, Rich Dad said, "What defines an asset are not words, but numbers. And if you can't read the numbers, you can't tell an asset from a hole in the ground." In accounting, Rich Dad would say, it's not the numbers, but what the numbers are telling you. It's just like words. It's not the words, but the story the words are telling you. If you want to be rich, you've got to read and understand numbers. If I heard that once, I heard it 1,000 times from my rich dad. And I also heard the rich acquire assets and the poor and middle class acquire liabilities. Here is how to tell the difference between an asset and a liability. Most accountants and financial professionals do not agree with the definitions, but these simple drawings were the start of strong financial foundations for two young boys. An asset is something that puts money in my pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of my pocket. This is really all you need to know. If you want to be rich, simply spend your life buying assets. If you want to be poor or middle class, spend your life buying liabilities. Illiteracy, both in words and numbers, is the foundation of financial struggle. If people are having difficulties financially, there is something that they don't understand, either in words or numbers. The rich are rich because they are more literate in different areas than people who struggle financially. So if you want to be rich and maintain your wealth, it's important to be financially literate in words as well as numbers. Numbers alone mean little, just as words out of context mean little. It's the story that counts. In financial reporting, reading numbers is looking for the plot, the story of where the cash is flowing. In 80% of most families, the financial story paints a picture of hard work to get ahead. However, this effort is for naught because they spend their lives buying liabilities instead of assets. Everyone has living expenses, the need for food, shelter, and clothing. It is the cash flow that tells the story of how a person handles their money. The reason I started with the story of the richest men in America is to illustrate the flaw in believing that money will solve all problems. That is why I cringe whenever I hear people ask me how to get rich quicker or where they should start. I often hear, "I'm in debt, so I need to make more money." But more money will often not solve the problem. In fact, it may compound the problem. Money often makes obvious our tragic human flaws, putting a spotlight on what we don't know. That is why, all too often, a person who comes into a sudden windfall of cash, let's say an inheritance, a pay raise, or lottery winnings, soon returns to the same financial mess, if not worse than the mess they were in before. Money only accentuates the cash flow pattern running in your head. If your pattern is to spend everything you get, most likely an increase in cash will just result in an increase in spending. Thus the saying, "A fool and his money is one big party." I have said many times that we go to school to gain scholastic and professional skills, both of which are important. We learn to make money with our professional skills. In the 1960s, when I was in high school, if someone did well academically, people assumed this bright student would go on to be a medical doctor because it was the profession with the promise of the greatest financial reward. Today, doctors face financial challenges I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Insurance companies taking control of the business, managed health care, government intervention, and malpractice suits. Today, kids want to be famous athletes, movie stars, rock stars, beauty queens, or CEOs because that is where the fame, money, and prestige are. That is the reason it is so hard to motivate kids in school today. They know that professional success is no longer solely linked to academic success, as it once was. Because students leave school without financial skills, millions of educated people pursue their profession successfully, but later find themselves struggling financially. They work harder, but don't get ahead. What is missing from their education is not how to make money, but how to manage money. It's called financial aptitude, what you do with the money once you make it, how to keep people from taking it from you, how to keep it longer, and how to make that money work hard for you. Most people don't understand why they struggle financially because they don't understand cash flow. A person can be highly educated, professionally successful, and financially illiterate. These people often work harder than they need to because they learned how to work hard, but not how to have their money work hard for them. The story of how the quest for a financial dream turns into a financial nightmare. The classic story of hardworking people has set a pattern. Recently married, the happy, highly educated young couple moves into one of their cramped, rented apartments. Immediately, they realize that they are saving money because two can live as cheaply as one. The problem is the apartment is cramped. They decide to save money to buy their dream home so they can have kids. They now have two incomes, and they begin to focus on their careers. Their incomes begin to increase. As their incomes go up, their expenses go up as well. The number one expense for most people is taxes. Many people think it's income tax, but for most Americans, their highest tax is Social Security. As an employee, it appears as if the Social Security tax combined with the Medicare tax rate is roughly 7.5%, but it's really 15% since the employer must match the Social Security amount. In essence, it is money the employer can't pay you. On top of that, you still have to pay income tax on the amount deducted from your wages for Social Security tax. Income you never received because it went directly to Social Security through withholding. Going back to the young couple, as a result of their incomes increasing, they decide to buy the house of their dreams. Once in their house, they have a new tax called property tax. Then they buy a new car, new furniture, and new appliances to match their new house. All of a sudden, they wake up and their liabilities column is full of mortgage and credit card debt. Their liabilities go up. They're now trapped in the rat race. Pretty soon, a baby comes along and they work harder. The process repeats itself. Higher incomes cause higher taxes, also called bracket creep. A credit card comes in the mail. They use it. It maxes out. A loan company calls and says their greatest asset, their home, has appreciated in value. Because their credit is so good, the company offers a bill consolidation loan and tells them the intelligent thing to do is clear off the high-interest consumer debt by paying off their credit card. And besides, interest on their home is a tax deduction. They go for it and pay off those high-interest credit cards. They breathe a sigh of relief. Their credit cards are paid off. They've now folded their consumer debt into their home mortgage. Their payments go down because they extend their debt over 30 years. It is the smart thing to do. Their neighbor calls to invite them to go shopping. The Memorial Day sale is on. They promise themselves they'll just window shop, but they take a credit card, just in case. I run into this young couple all the time. Their names change, but their financial dilemma is the same. They come to one of my talks to hear what I have to say. They ask me, "Can you tell us how to make more money?" They don't understand that their trouble is really how they choose to spend the money they do have. It is caused by financial illiteracy and not understanding the difference between an asset and a liability. More money seldom solves someone's money problems. Intelligence solves problems. There is a saying a friend of mine says over and over to people in debt. If you find you have dug yourself into a hole, stop digging. As a child, my dad often told us that the Japanese were aware of 3 powers: the power of the sword, the jewel, and the mirror. The sword symbolizes the power of weapons. America has spent trillions of dollars on weapons, and because of this is a powerful military presence in the world. The jewel symbolizes the power of money. There is some degree of truth to the saying, "Remember the golden rule." He who has the gold makes the rules. The mirror symbolizes the power of self-knowledge. This self-knowledge, according to Japanese legend, was the most treasured of the three. All too often, the poor and middle class allow the power of money to control them. By simply getting up and working harder, failing to ask themselves if what they do makes sense, they shoot themselves in the foot as they leave for work every morning. By not fully understanding money, the vast majority of people allow its awesome power to control them. If they used the power of the mirror, they would have asked themselves, does this make sense? All too often, instead of trusting their inner wisdom, that genius inside, most people follow the crowd. They do things because everybody else does them. They conform rather than question. Often, they mindlessly repeat what they have been told. Diversify. Your home is an asset. Your home is your biggest investment. You get a tax break for going into greater debt. Get a safe job. Don't make mistakes. Don't take risks. It is said that the fear of public speaking is a fear greater than death for most people. According to psychiatrists, the fear of public speaking is caused by the fear of ostracism, the fear of standing out, the fear of criticism, the fear of ridicule, and the fear of being an outcast. The fear of being different prevents most people from seeking new ways to solve their problems. That is why my educated dad said the Japanese valued the power of the mirror the most, for it is only when we look into it that we find truth. Fear is the main reason that people say, play it safe. That goes for anything, be it sports, relationships, careers, or money. It is that same fear, the fear of ostracism, that causes people to conform to, and not question, commonly accepted opinions or popular trends. Your home is an asset. Get a bill consolidation loan and get out of debt. Work harder. It's a promotion. Someday I'll be a vice president. Save money. When I get a raise, I'll buy us a bigger house. Mutual funds are safe. Many financial problems are caused by trying to keep up with the Joneses. Occasionally, we all need to look in the mirror and be true to our inner wisdom rather than our fears. By the time Mike and I were 16 years old, we began to have problems in school. We were not bad kids. We just began to separate from the crowd. We worked for Mike's dad after school and on weekends. Mike and I often spent hours after work just sitting at a table with his dad while he held meetings with his bankers, attorneys, accountants, brokers, investors, managers, and employees. Here was a man who had left school at 13, who was now directing, instructing, ordering, and asking questions of educated people. They came at his beck and call and cringed when he didn't approve of them. Here was a man who had not gone along with the crowd. He was a man who did his own thinking and detested the words, "We have to do it this way because that's the way everyone else does it." He also hated the word can't. If you wanted him to do something, just say, "I don't think you can do it." Mike and I learned more sitting in on his meetings than we did in all our years of school, college included. Mike's dad was not book smart, but he was financially educated and successful as a result. He told us over and over again, an intelligent person hires people who are more intelligent than he is. So Mike and I had the benefit of spending hours listening to and learning from intelligent people. But because of this, Mike and I couldn't go along with the standard dogma our teachers preached, and that caused problems. Whenever the teacher said, "If you don't get good grades, you won't do well in the real world," Mike and I just raised our eyebrows. When we were told to follow set procedures and not deviate from the rules, we could see how school discouraged creativity. We started to understand why our rich dad told us that schools were designed to produce good employees instead of employers.
Occasionally, Mike or I would ask our teachers how what we studied was applicable to the real world, or why we never studied money and how it worked. To the latter question, we often got the answer that money was not important, that if we excelled in our education, the money would follow. The more we knew about the power of money, the more distant we grew from the teachers and our classmates. My highly educated dad never pressured me about my grades, but we did begin to argue about money. By the time I was 16, I probably had a far better foundation with money than both my parents. I could keep books, I listened to tax accountants, corporate attorneys, bankers, real estate brokers, investors, and so forth. By contrast, my dad talked to other teachers. One day, my dad told me that our home was his greatest investment. A not-too-pleasant argument took place when I showed him why I thought a house was not a good investment. I showed him the ancillary expenses that went along with owning the home. A bigger home meant bigger expenses, and the cash flow kept going out through the expense column. Today, people still challenge me on the idea of a house not being an asset. I know that for many people, it is their dream as well as their largest investment. And owning your own home is better than nothing. I simply offer an alternative way of looking at this popular dogma. If my wife and I were to buy a bigger, flashier house, we realize it wouldn't be an asset. It would be a liability since it would take money out of our pocket. So here is the argument I put forth. I really don't expect most people to agree with it because your home is an emotional thing, and when it comes to money, high emotions tend to lower financial intelligence. I know from personal experience that money has a way of making every decision emotional. 1. When it comes to houses, most people work all their lives paying for a home they never own. In other words, most people buy a new house every few years, each time incurring a new 30-year loan to pay off the previous one. 2. Even though people receive a tax deduction for interest on mortgage payments, they pay for all their other expenses with after-tax dollars, even after they pay off their mortgage. 3. My wife's parents were shocked when the property taxes on their home increased to $1,000 a month. This was after they had retired, so the increase put a strain on their retirement budget and they felt forced to move. 4. Houses do not always go up in value. I have friends who owe $1 million for a home that today would sell for far less. 5. The greatest losses of all are those from missed opportunities. If all your money is tied up in your house, you may be forced to work harder because your money continues blowing out of the expense column instead of adding to the asset column, the classic middle-class cash flow pattern. If a young couple would put more money into their asset column early on, their later years would be easier. Their assets would have grown and would be available to help cover expenses. All too often, a house only serves as a vehicle for incurring a home equity loan to pay for mounting expenses. In summary, the end result in making a decision to own a house that is too expensive in lieu of starting an investment portfolio impacts an individual in at least the following 3 ways. 1. Loss of time during which other assets could have grown in value. 2. Loss of additional capital which could have been invested instead of paying for high-maintenance expenses related directly to the home. 3. Loss of education. Too often, people count their house and savings and retirement plans as all they have in their asset column.